My name is Jason, and I'm 22 years old. I have an older sister named Sarah, who's 24. We've always had a bit of a strained relationship, mostly because she's always been the golden child in our family. No matter what happened, she could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. On the other hand, I was often overlooked. I was expected to handle things on my own, and that wasn't just emotionally, it was financial too. While Sarah got a lot of support in pretty much every way possible, I was expected to fend for myself. Sarah's path in life has been, well, unconventional, to say the least. She dropped out of college in her final year to follow her passion for music. She joined a band, which, in hindsight, was a terrible decision. She didn't have the talent to go far, and after 6 months, the band dropped her. Still, she came back home, and instead of facing any consequences for her decisions, she was coddled. Our parents, especially Mom, treated her like a fragile flower, making excuses for every misstep. Contrast this with my own experience. When I graduated high school, I was told flat out that I had to figure out how to pay for my college education myself. No help with tuition, no handouts. Just, if you want to go to college, it's on you. I didn't complain, though. I went to work, took out loans, and did whatever I could to manage. I thought it was just the way things were, but then I saw Sarah get all the support she needed, financially, emotionally, and in every other way. And that's when I started to really feel the unfairness. The tension between Sarah and me became even more obvious when it came to family events. It always seemed like everything was geared toward her. I didn't really mind at first, figuring that she needed the attention. But over time, it started to wear on me. The more I saw it, the more it hurt. Why couldn't I get the same kind of support? Why was everything always about her? The breaking point came during my graduation. The ceremony was a big deal for me. It was my way of showing that I could do something on my own. I had worked so hard to get through college without the help of our parents, and for once, I wanted them to be there. I asked them to come to the ceremony, but their response was not what I expected. They told me that they couldn't come to my graduation because they had already planned a big event for Sarah. You see, Sarah had been feeling down about her life choices, her failed music career, the fact that she had dropped out of college, and everything that came with it. To cheer her up, they had decided to throw her a celebration to make her feel better. This was supposed to be a special day for me, but they had completely brushed it aside for Sarah's sake. I was devastated. I couldn't believe that they would prioritize a party for Sarah over being there for me on one of the most important days of my life. I wasn't asking for the world, just their presence at my graduation. Instead, they told me that Sarah needed them more. It was a gut punch, and I don't think I fully processed the weight of it at the time, but it left a mark. At that moment, I couldn't hold back anymore. I had been dealing with this for years, the double standards, the constant favoritism, and I finally snapped. I called them out for always treating Sarah like a princess while expecting me to do everything on my own. I told them I was sick of it. I had sacrificed so much, and yet they always turned a blind eye to my efforts. It felt like no matter what I did, I would always be second to Sarah. Our conversation escalated quickly. Mom tried to defend herself, saying I was overreacting, that it was just a graduation, but I wasn't having it anymore. I told them that if they couldn't even make the effort to show up for my big day, then I was done with them. It was unfair, and I was done being the one who always got the short end of the stick. They didn't take it well. My dad was the first to get defensive, accusing me of making a drama out of a simple situation. He didn't understand why I was so upset. He tried to tell me that I was being selfish because Sarah needed their support more than I did. It was like talking to a brick wall. He just couldn't understand that, for once, I needed them too. But I was tired. I didn't want to explain myself anymore. I didn't want to beg for their attention and validation, so I hung up. It was done. I had had enough. Feeling defeated, but also a little relieved, I called my grandparents. They had always been the ones to truly support me. Unlike my parents, they never played favorites and always treated me with respect. I asked if they would come to my graduation instead of my parents. They immediately agreed. I was honestly so thankful for them. I knew that, unlike my parents, they would show up for me when it mattered. The day of the graduation, I went in knowing that things with my parents were likely never going to be the same. I had already made peace with it. My grandparents were there, cheering me on like they always had, and that was all that mattered to me. But the situation wasn't over yet. My parents couldn't let things go that easily. After the ceremony, I got a call from my dad. He was furious. He told me I was causing unnecessary drama and that I was being childish. He said I should have just understood that Sarah needed them more at the moment. It felt like nothing was ever going to change. I was just the guy who had to deal with it, no matter how unfair it was. I didn't engage much. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I'd said what I had to say. My parents, my sister, none of them understood. But my grandparents did, and that was enough for me. This was the first step in what would become a bigger and more painful realization about my family. It wasn't just about the graduation or Sarah's failed music career. It was about the years of inequality, the constant comparisons, and the emotional weight of always being second best. I had reached my limit. After my graduation, I thought things would calm down, but they only got worse. My parents didn't just stop at ignoring my big day. They escalated. As soon as they realized they weren't going to get what they wanted, they began manipulating the situation. My mom, especially, was relentless. She called me multiple times over the next few days, trying to make me feel guilty for how I handled things. She kept saying that they didn't deserve this, that it wasn't fair for me to shut them out just because of one incident. But the truth was, it wasn't just about the graduation. It wasn't even just about Sarah. It was about years of being treated differently, of constantly being told I wasn't good enough, or that my accomplishments didn't matter as much as hers. I was tired of always feeling like the backup plan, the afterthought. They had conditioned me to believe that I was the one who had to work harder, sacrifice more, and accept less. But they never expected me to stand up for myself. After a few days of nonstop calls and texts from my parents, trying to guilt-trip me into forgiving them, I finally snapped. I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't just let them manipulate me into feeling like I was being unreasonable. I wasn't being selfish. I was standing up for myself. But they couldn't see it. They never saw it. So I decided to call them out, once and for all. I remember the day clearly. I sat down with my phone in hand, steeling myself for what I had to say. It had been building up for years, and now was the moment I needed to be firm. I called my parents, knowing it would probably be the last time I'd do so for a while. When they picked up, I didn't waste time. I told them that I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. I was tired of always being the one to apologize or give in, and I wasn't going to do it this time. I explained that their behavior had gone on for too long, and I wasn't going to keep accepting it. My mom tried the usual tactics: tears, guilt, the whole 9 yards. She cried, told me I was being heartless, that they had always forgiven me for my mistakes, so why couldn't I forgive them for one thing? But I wasn't having it. The more she cried, the more I felt like I had to hold my ground. I wasn't going to let her emotional manipulation work on me anymore. I wasn't going to let her make me feel bad for something that was entirely their fault. I knew what she was doing. I had seen it countless times before, with Sarah, with me, with everyone else. It was her way of deflecting responsibility, making herself the victim, even when she was the one who had messed up. It made me sick. So, I didn't let her guilt-trip me into backing down. I simply told her I needed space, that if they were truly sorry, they would respect that. I made it clear that I wasn't ready to forgive them yet. If they wanted me to ever consider it, they would have to prove they understood why I felt the way I did, and that started with giving me time to process everything. At that point, my dad jumped in. He was just as angry, accusing me of being overly dramatic, of making a mountain out of a molehill. To him, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was just a graduation. He said I should have been more understanding, that Sarah needed them more, that it wasn't personal. But it was personal. It was always personal. And I wasn't going to let him trivialize it. I told him the truth. I told him that it wasn't about one graduation. It was about years of being pushed aside for Sarah. It was about how I had to handle everything on my own, while Sarah got everything handed to her. It was about the emotional neglect, the constant undermining of my achievements, the way they treated me like I didn't matter as much as her. I told him that I was done being the one to bend, to adjust, to accommodate their selfishness. I was done. The conversation ended awkwardly. They didn't know what else to say, and frankly, I didn't care. I had said what needed to be said, and I was no longer afraid of their reactions. I knew it was time to cut ties for good. I knew that no matter how hard I tried, I would never get the kind of respect or love I deserved from them, and that realization stung. It really did. But it also gave me a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to please them. I wasn't trying to win their approval. I was just done. After that, I didn't respond to their calls. I didn't answer any more texts. I blocked them on social media too because I couldn't deal with the emotional fallout anymore. I felt lighter in a way, but also a little guilty. There was still a part of me that wanted their approval. I still wanted them to see me, to understand me, but I knew it wasn't going to happen. Not unless they were willing to do the work. And I wasn't going to hold my breath waiting for them to do that. So I turned to my grandparents. They were the only ones who had ever truly supported me. They never treated me like I was second best. They were always there when I needed them, no questions asked. And when I called them to let them know about the situation, they didn't hesitate to offer their support. They promised they'd be there for me, no matter what. That meant more to me than I can explain. They had always been the stable, steady presence in my life, and now, more than ever, I needed that. But of course, my parents didn't just let it go. They couldn't accept the fact that I was standing up for myself. So after blocking them, I started getting passive-aggressive messages on social media. They weren't direct at first, but it was clear they were trying to manipulate the situation, portraying themselves as the victims, as if I was the one who was being unreasonable. I saw the post from my mom, from Sarah, and it only fueled my anger. But instead of reacting, I took a step back. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. What I didn't expect was the next move from Sarah. She had no real involvement in the situation, but for some reason, she felt the need to get involved. The whole thing became a mess. She started posting about how I was an ungrateful brat, how I had wronged my parents, and that she was ashamed to be related to me. I was shocked, but at the same time, I wasn't. I knew this was coming. Sarah had always been on their side, and I was just the one who had been left behind. This was just the beginning, and honestly, it was only going to get worse before it got better. But I had made up my mind. I was done with the manipulation. I was done being their punching bag. The days following my graduation were oddly quiet. My parents didn't contact me for a while, and honestly, I was fine with that. It felt like the weight had been lifted. I didn't have to pretend that everything was fine between us anymore. My grandparents were supportive, and that's what mattered to me. But then came the social media posts. I hadn't been paying much attention to Facebook or Instagram, but one evening, I checked my phone, and there it was. Sarah had posted a rant about me. I could barely believe it. She was going off about how I was an ungrateful brat, how I had treated our parents like crap, and how I had no respect for everything they'd done for me. It felt like a slap in the face. I had just finished calling out my parents for the first time in my life, and now Sarah was twisting the whole story to make me look like the villain. Her post was full of emotional manipulation. She even had the audacity to claim that if anyone in her circle decided to keep in touch with me after everything I'd done, she'd cut them out of her life too. It was bizarre. Sarah hadn't even been involved in the dinner where my parents and I clashed, and now she was acting like she had the right to call me out publicly. I felt my blood boil. I couldn't let her get away with this. This was my life, my decision, and I wasn't going to let her or anyone else make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. So, I commented on her post, explaining my side of the story. I didn't get into a detailed argument, but I just stated the facts as I saw them. I wasn't ungrateful. I was just tired of the unequal treatment. I wasn't going to apologize for that. Of course, she deleted my comment almost immediately. That was when I realized that she wasn't interested in the truth. She just wanted to make sure the public perception of her family remained spotless, no matter what. So, I did what I had to do. I made my own post. I didn't care anymore. The truth needed to be out there, even if it meant airing my family's dirty laundry. The war was on. I spent the next few days in a weird limbo, constantly checking my phone to see how the battle was progressing. Sarah wasn't letting up. She kept posting about how I had treated our parents, twisting things to make it seem like I was the problem. The more I saw her posts, the more I realized that Sarah had always been a master manipulator. She was good at making herself look like the victim, even when it wasn't true. It was infuriating. And honestly, it made me sick to my stomach. I wanted to just walk away from it, but I couldn't. This wasn't just about my graduation anymore. This was about years of being overlooked, of being treated like my achievements didn't matter, and my feelings didn't count. And now, here was Sarah, still trying to paint herself as the innocent one. I had to defend myself, and if that meant making my personal life public, then so be it. It wasn't just Sarah's posts that had me on edge. My parents were still trying to get in touch, blowing up my phone, leaving me voicemails and sending endless texts. They wanted me to talk, to fix things. But I wasn't ready for that. I'd already said what I needed to say. If they couldn't respect that, then I didn't need them in my life. And then came something I didn't expect. One of Sarah's former bandmates, someone I hadn't heard from in ages, reached out to me. They wanted to talk about Sarah, and they didn't have kind things to say. Apparently, Sarah had been lying about a lot of things, including her student loans and her reason for leaving college. For years, Sarah had told everyone that she had taken out a massive student loan to pay for college, and that her music career had been derailed because of the debt she owed. But according to her old bandmate, Sarah had always bragged about how our parents paid for her college tuition. The loan, it was all a lie. This person had witnessed the whole thing. Sarah living at home, getting money from our parents, and claiming that she was taking care of herself while all along, she was depending on them to bail her out. It felt like the floor dropped out from under me when I heard this. All this time, Sarah had been portraying herself as the victim of financial hardship, but in reality, she'd been living off our parents while they were working hard to pay their bills. It was a lie, and now it was out in the open. But it didn't stop there. The bandmate also told me that Sarah had tried to manipulate the group into thinking that she had been treated unfairly by them. They had tried to drop her from the band because she wasn't talented enough, but she'd spun the story into one of betrayal and hurt. She had claimed that the bandmates had promised her a permanent spot, but that was never true. They had told her from the beginning that she was just a substitute while they searched for someone better. And when they found that person, they dropped her without hesitation. It was a huge betrayal of trust from Sarah. I couldn't believe she'd been lying to me for all these years, not only about her situation, but also about how she portrayed herself to everyone else. The more I thought about it, the more everything began to make sense. Sarah had been playing the victim her whole life, manipulating everyone around her to get what she wanted, and our parents had been enabling it. But now that the truth was out, I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure how to process this new information. I had been living with the idea that my sister and I were equally supported by our parents, but in reality, she had been the one getting everything handed to her. It was time to face the truth. I didn't want to be part of this toxic cycle anymore. I knew I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. The lies, the manipulation, the favoritism. It was all too much. I was done with Sarah. I was done with my parents. And I was done with the way they had treated me for years. From that moment on, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to give them another chance to hurt me. I would continue to move forward with my grandparents by my side, the only people who had ever truly supported me. The final break had come. There was no going back. It's been a few days since the graduation fiasco, and I'm still processing everything. I thought I'd feel better after the ceremony, but honestly, the tension with my parents only got worse. I didn't hear from them for a while after I hung up on my dad. I didn't respond to any of their calls or messages. I was sick of it. Every time I spoke to them, it felt like I was being gaslighted or blamed for everything. I had tried explaining myself multiple times, but nothing seemed to get through. The quiet was short-lived, though. Of course, they couldn't leave it at that. It wasn't long before I started getting messages from Sarah. At first I ignored them, but eventually she started posting about me on social media. She called me an ungrateful brat and said she was ashamed to be related to me. She accused me of treating our parents horribly and said I didn't appreciate everything they'd done for me. It was the same story they had been telling all along, painting themselves as the victims. What really bothered me was that Sarah wasn't even there. She hadn't been at the lunch with our parents, and yet here she was, throwing her opinions around. She didn't understand what was happening, but that didn't stop her from jumping in. I couldn't understand why she felt so entitled to speak for everyone when she had no clue about the real issue. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I was beyond frustrated. So, I left a comment on one of her posts. I told her that she had no idea what she was talking about, and that the reality was, our parents had always treated her differently than they treated me. I said she had been spoiled her whole life while I was expected to take care of myself. I tried to explain that I wasn't angry at them because of the graduation, but because of the years of unfair treatment. It was about much more than just that one day. But of course, she deleted my comment almost immediately, so I did what I had to do. I made my own post, laying out the truth. I wasn't going to let her or anyone else rewrite our family's history. It wasn't just about me not getting to graduate with my parents there. It was about the constant neglect, the emotional manipulation, and the unfairness that had been building up for years. Sarah wasn't the only one who made things worse. Our parents weren't any better. They started texting me, asking me to reconsider, telling me I was overreacting. They wanted me to talk it out, to come back to the family fold and make up, because apparently, family was everything. But the thing was, it never felt like family to me. Family was about respect, not about being treated like an afterthought while they pampered Sarah. I didn't want to keep playing this game of pretending that everything was fine when I was just being used. The social media war was exhausting. It felt like everyone was taking sides, but most of the people in our circle were confused. Some of my friends sided with me, and others sided with Sarah, mostly because they had no idea what the real issue was. They didn't know how deep the favoritism ran in our family. I felt like my life was being dragged through the mud, but at the same time, I wasn't about to let my parents and Sarah control the narrative. I had to stand my ground, even if it meant facing public criticism. They had lied so many times, manipulated situations, and tried to gaslight me into thinking I was the problem, but I wasn't. Days passed, and the drama didn't slow down. Sarah kept posting about me, twisting everything. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, more information came to light that completely changed the way I saw everything. One of Sarah's old bandmates, who had always been kind of a distant acquaintance, decided to speak out about the lies Sarah had been telling. This person revealed the truth about Sarah's so-called struggles in the band and how she had always exaggerated the story to make herself look like the victim. She had been bragging about how our parents were paying her way through college, while making it seem like she had struggled with student loans like I had. The truth was, she had always been supported by our parents, yet she'd played the victim card whenever it suited her. When I found this out, I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief because the lies were finally being exposed, and anger because I had been manipulated for so long. My whole life had been a backdrop to their drama, and they had never once thought about how it all affected me. Sarah deleted all her posts after the truth came out, acting like nothing had ever happened. But I know the truth now. I had seen enough. I was done with all of them. My parents, my sister, the lies, the manipulation. There was no going back. I wasn't going to be part of their toxic family dynamic anymore. I had been trying to fit into a mold that didn't fit me, and I had finally realized that I was better off without them. The hardest part was realizing that my grandparents had also been caught in the middle of all of this. They had always supported me, but now they were stepping away too, saying they were done with my parents. That felt like both a loss and a relief, because while I didn't want to cut off my family, I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it so clearly wasn't. At this point, the decision felt final. I wasn't going to waste any more time hoping for change. I had my grandparents, and they were the only family I needed. I'm done. It's been a few days since I last saw my parents, and the tension still feels like a weight I can't shake off. Despite everything, I couldn't help but wonder whether I had done the right thing. Was I being too harsh? Should I have just let things slide, let the past go, and moved on? I tried to push those thoughts away, but I couldn't ignore the fact that the silence between us felt final, and for once, I didn't mind. After that awkward meeting at the hotel, where my parents tried their best to guilt-trip me into forgiving them, I realized something that hit me harder than anything they had said. Nothing was going to change. I could feel their insincerity in every word they spoke, in every tear my mom tried to shed. The apology they offered wasn't real. It was a manipulation tactic. They wanted me to soften, to cave in, to return to the same toxic cycle that had been repeating for years. But I wasn't having it anymore. I saw right through their act. My mom's waterworks were just another attempt to win me over, just another way to make me feel responsible for their feelings. But this time, I wasn't the one who had messed up. I hadn't asked to be treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. They had been the ones who had abandoned me, who had always prioritized Sarah and let me shoulder everything alone. My anger wasn't something I could just ignore anymore, and I was proud of myself for standing firm. When I left that lunch, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I knew that they didn't really understand the depth of what they'd done wrong, but that didn't matter anymore. It wasn't my job to explain myself to them. I had already said everything I needed to say. And now, I needed to focus on what came next, on building a life that wasn't dependent on their approval. The hardest part was dealing with Sarah. She took the whole family drama to social media, launching into this public campaign of passive-aggressive posts about how I was the ungrateful one, how I had ruined everything for them. I was honestly floored by the audacity. Sarah wasn't even there at lunch. She wasn't involved in the conversation. Yet somehow, she felt entitled to publicly shame me. Her posts were nothing but her trying to justify the dysfunction in our family, making herself out to be the victim. I couldn't stand it. I was tempted to lash out, to call her out on her lies, to show everyone the truth about how she had always been favored, how she had always been coddled, how my parents had always gone above and beyond for her. But I knew that wouldn't do me any good. It would only make things worse. So instead, I did what I always did. Nothing. I stayed silent. I let her post her hurtful comments, let her fuel the drama, knowing that I didn't need to engage. But as the days went by, something shifted in me. I realized that I didn't need to justify my actions to anyone. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The more I saw Sarah's posts, the more I was reminded of how far I had come. I was no longer the person who cowered in the face of family pressure, the one who let my parents walk all over me. I was someone who had finally broken free, and I had to remind myself of that. Every time I felt like second-guessing my decisions, I had to remember why I had made them in the first place. I wasn't playing the victim. I wasn't the one who had caused this mess. I had simply refused to stay quiet any longer. I had refused to let my family treat me like I didn't matter. The social media battle between Sarah and me became draining, though. Every time I checked my feed, there she was, posting more manipulative things, twisting the truth to make me look like the bad guy. And for a moment, I thought about confronting her again. I thought about making another post of my own, explaining my side. But then I remembered something my grandparents had told me when they first found out about the whole situation. Don't give them the satisfaction. They told me to focus on the people who truly supported me, not the ones who tried to drag me down. So, I took their advice to heart. I stopped responding to Sarah's posts. I blocked her on social media, then blocked my parents too. There was no point in letting them continue to manipulate the situation, not when I had already made my decision. It wasn't easy. I'd spent years seeking their approval, hoping they would love me the way I wanted to be loved. And even though I knew they couldn't give me that, there was still a small part of me that wished they would try. But I had to let go of that part. I had to stop hoping for something that was never going to happen. My family had made their choices, and I had to make mine. And my choice was clear. I wasn't going to keep fighting for something that wasn't real. I wasn't going to keep chasing after their love, their approval, their validation. I had my grandparents. They were the ones who had always stood by me. They were the ones who supported me, no questions asked. And at the end of the day, that's all I needed. I could feel myself getting stronger with every day that passed. The guilt, the confusion, the constant questioning. Those feelings were fading. I had finally freed myself from the emotional cage I'd been living in. It was painful, yes, but it was also empowering. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. As time went on, I started to see how toxic the whole situation had been. And while I didn't expect anything to change overnight, I knew I had made the right choice. There was no going back. My parents and Sarah could keep playing their games, but I was done. I was building something better now, something real, and I didn't need them for it. A few days after the revelation about Sarah's lies, I decided I couldn't ignore the situation any longer. The weight of everything, my parents, Sarah, the endless manipulation, was starting to feel too heavy. I knew deep down that my decision to cut them off wasn't just about one incident or one lie. It was the culmination of years of feeling like I didn't matter, like I was only ever there to meet their expectations, while Sarah was the one who got to be the golden child, no matter how misbehaved or lied. I tried to block out all the noise, the posts, the calls, the texts, but it kept creeping in. My phone was still blowing up, especially from Sarah, who wasn't backing down. She posted more rants, calling me every name in the book, claiming I was a selfish, ungrateful person who only cared about money and not family. I tried to ignore it, but each new post seemed to sting worse than the last. She was twisting everything, portraying herself as the martyr in this family drama, while I was painted as the villain who just didn't understand. The thing is, I did understand. I understood all too well. I understood that I was tired of being manipulated. I understood that I deserved to be treated with the same respect and care that Sarah was always given. But what I didn't expect was for the lies to keep coming, or for the emotional manipulation to get even more intense. My parents, not wanting to lose face or control, started reaching out through friends, trying to guilt-trip me into talking to them. They'd say things like, "This is tearing the family apart," or "You're throwing away everything we've built." But they weren't acknowledging the real issue here, their favoritism, their dishonesty, their refusal to treat me like I mattered as much as Sarah did. It all came to a head when one of our mutual friends reached out, asking if I was really okay with cutting ties with my family. They weren't trying to side with anyone, but they genuinely seemed worried about me. I appreciated their concern, but it didn't change anything. They didn't understand the years of tension I'd lived through, the feeling of being overlooked and undervalued every time my parents praised Sarah for the same mistakes they criticized me for. I knew then that I couldn't let this spiral further. I couldn't keep getting sucked into their emotional games, and I didn't want to be the family member who kept taking the high road while being trampled over. I also realized that even though this situation was painful, I was learning so much about myself in the process. I was finally realizing my worth. I didn't need to beg for their love or approval anymore. I didn't need to stay in a relationship that drained me. The hardest part was realizing that I might never get the apology I was waiting for. My parents would never fully understand how they hurt me, and Sarah would always see herself as the victim. But I couldn't change them, and I didn't want to keep holding on to the hope that they'd wake up one day and see things my way. All I could do was focus on what I had left. My grandparents, the people who had always been there for me without any strings attached. They were my real family now. I didn't block my parents or Sarah from everything, but I made it clear that I wouldn't be responding anymore. I didn't need their drama in my life, and I didn't owe them any explanations for my actions. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me taking control of my own life and moving forward in a healthier, happier direction. As I moved on, I found peace in knowing I had made the right choice. I was no longer under their thumb, no longer hoping for validation from people who could never give it to me in a healthy way. It wasn't easy, but I was free. Free from the toxicity, free from manipulation, and free to be the person I was meant to be without constantly looking over my shoulder for approval that would never come. My grandparents were by my side, supporting me every step of the way, and that was all I needed now. I could let go of the past, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Story 2. Sophia, Ellie's mother, had always impressed Ellie with her fortitude and tenacity. After Ellie's father abandoned them before she was even born, Sophia had to raise Ellie alone. Ellie believed that their relationship was unshakable since for years it was just the two of them against the world. Sophia put forth a lot of effort to support her kid, adamant about providing Ellie with a better life than she had. With Sophia's second marriage, things started to shift. Her recent spouse. Ellie believed that Mark, a quiet guy with a reliable career, would provide some stability in their life. A few years later, Sophia gave birth to twin boys, bringing laughter and pleasure to the home. Or so it appeared. But Ellie sensed the change almost instantly under the surface. Her mother's emphasis, which had previously been all on her, started to shift to the twins. Ellie first attempted to be sympathetic. Where she could, she offered assistance, believing that their relationship will return to normal when the twins grew older, and that it was only a phase. But things just got worse. Sophia grew aloof, and her once friendly attitude with Ellie cooled. Eventually, Sophia and Mark revealed the financial burden of parenting twins during a heated family conversation. They were no longer able to provide for Ellie. Ellie was informed she had to move out when she was barely 17. Feeling deceived and abandoned, after packing her things, Ellie departed the house she had known her entire life. She was thrown into an unfamiliar environment and had to mature far earlier than she had ever anticipated. She had no idea that this was the beginning of a journey that would change the way she thought about love, family, and resiliency. Ellie can still clearly recall the day she was ordered to leave when she was only 17. She was thrown into an emotional maelstrom that included uncertainty, rage, and heartache. She kept thinking about what her mother had said. Simply put, we can no longer afford to keep you here. She gathered her things. She left the mansion that had been her safe refuge, her hands shaking. She had no notion how she was going to live, no strategy, and no direction. Her grandparents were the only people she could turn to. Although they embraced her, Ellie sensed that they were disappointed by Sophia's choice. They were retired and on a fixed income, yet they provided her with a place to live. Ellie was aware that she couldn't rely on them for very long, resolute in carrying her own burden. Ellie started looking for a part-time job right away. She ultimately secured a job at a nearby cafe, juggling weekend and after-school stints. Although the money was little, it was sufficient to meet her need. School supplies, bus tickets, and a little more for unforeseen circumstances. It was a difficult adjustment from a carefree adolescent to a young adult with obligations. Her days turned into a haze of late nights and early mornings. She would get up early to get ready for school, spend her afternoons cramming through her assignments, and then go directly to work. Despite the constant weariness, Ellie persevered because she was determined to succeed in life. Because money was always tight, she had to make compromises all the time. To save money, she wore the same few clothes and avoided social events. She knew she couldn't afford to indulge on anything other than necessities, so on some evenings, she went to bed hungry. Ellie was committed to her studies in spite of the difficulties. She was aware that it was her path to a brighter future, but maintaining motivation was a struggle in and of itself. On other evenings, the stress of her circumstances felt like it might crush her. She frequently questioned how her life had devolved into this, how the mother could so readily abandon her after claiming to love her without conditions. The most difficult aspect was the loneliness. Because she couldn't relate to her peers' carefree lifestyles, Ellie felt alienated at school. While her reality was a never-ending battle to make ends meet, she admired their tales of weekend plans and family trips. She was scared of the pitying glances and uncomfortable silences that would follow, so she hardly ever talked about her home life. Ellie's greatest strength, however, was her tenacity. Little triumphs, her first paycheck, passing a challenging test, and the odd encouraging remark from her grandparents gave her comfort. She eventually came to value her freedom. Every obstacle she surmounted served as a reminder of her resilience and a step toward the life she had always dreamed of. Despite the uncertainty of the path ahead, Ellie refused to allow her situation define who she was. One day she will create a life free from dependence on others, she promised herself. A life in which she would be able to rise above everything, not as someone who was abandoned. Ellie had a rather unusual path to college. Without the help of her stepfather or mother, she was on her own to go through the procedure. Determined to build a future for herself, she worked diligently at her part-time job while balancing her studies. Her requirement for a co-signer for her education debts was the most obstacle. Her parents vehemently objected, saying they needed to preserve money for the baby's future. Their rejection served as a bitter reminder of their low regard for her. Fortunately, Ellie's uncle took over, yet not directly connected to her life. He agreed to co-sign her debt with one stipulation since he respected her tenacity. She had to swear that she would never let him pay for it. I appreciate his trust. Ellie promised to put in a lot of effort and make sure all payments were completed on schedule. She eventually started along the road to further study with that help. Life in college was hectic. Ellie decided to major in business at a public institution in the hopes of securing a steady job. Back-to-back classes, study sessions, and part-time jobs at a local bookstore made for exhausting days for her. The financial burden was enormous. Loan payments, groceries, rent, and textbooks hung over her like a threatening fog. She struggled to make ends meet and frequently relied on late-night coffee and quick noodles. Ellie did not have the luxury of contacting home for assistance, unlike her friends. She was unable to talk about her problems or celebrate her successes. Her grandparents, who occasionally wrote letters full of encouraging words and tiny care gifts, were the closest thing to family support for her mother. Ellie was kept grounded and reminded that she wasn't entirely alone by these small gestures of affection. Ellie thrived academically in spite of the difficulties. Determining to maximize her education, she devotes herself fully to her studies. While her peers partied on the weekends, she looked for internships, attended networking events, and made contacts wherever she could. Ellie used hers to plan her future and conduct industry research. She was aware that her degree was her key to freedom and not simply a piece of paper. When Ellie crossed the stage to accept her diploma, it was a melancholy graduation day. Knowing her mother wouldn't be present, she looked around the throng. The sight of her grandparents, who had traveled despite their advanced age, gave her comfort even if the absence was painful. They applauded her and clapped. Their teary eyes betray their pride. Ellie would never forget that moment. A testament to her perseverance and hard effort, Ellie immediately entered the workforce after graduating. Eager to prove herself, she secured an entry-level position with a marketing company. The first several years were difficult. Rent, electricity, and loan payments were all barely covered by her wages, leaving little money for other expenses. Determined to make a name for herself and advance in the company, she frequently worked late into the night. Financial balancing was a never-ending battle. Luxuries like eating out or new clothes were seldom indulgences, and every dollar was tracked down. There were times when Ellie questioned if she would ever be able to escape the pattern of living paycheck to paycheck, but every obstacle just strengthened her resolve. She refused to allow short-term setbacks dictate her destiny, since she was proud of how far she had gone. Ellie's diligence gradually paid off. At work, she started to get noticed, get promoted, and take on more challenging tasks. She finally felt stable when her once empty savings account began to increase. As she negotiated adulthood, the perseverance, tenacity, and self-control she had acquired throughout her undergraduate years continued to serve as her compass. Ellie never lost sight of the sacrifices she had to make in order to reach her current position. Although her path wasn't straightforward, it helped her become a person who could take on any task. She was demonstrating to the world and to herself that she was so much more than the girl her family had abandoned by creating a life on her terms. Ellie's path through the business world was evidence of her unwavering willpower and perseverance. She gave her all to her work at a marketing agency after graduation, beginning at the bottom and putting forth endless effort to establish her value. She immediately established a reputation for having keen problem-solving abilities, original ideas, and the capacity to lead under duress. Her efforts were rewarded, and she rose through the ranks of the company in a matter of years, receiving one promotion, one after the other. Ellie maintained her concentration and humility in spite of her increasing success. She wasn't going to take her achievements for granted, since she understood that the challenges she had encountered had helped to mold her into the person she was today. She made her career her first focus and continued to push herself with each accomplishment. She surmounted obstacles, including difficult teen relationships and late-night assignments, with poise and tenacity. Ellie eventually attained a position she had previously only imagined: CEO of a successful technology business. It was the result of years of arduous labor, selflessness, and unwavering determination. However, she decided to keep her accomplishment a secret. Ellie wasn't the kind to look to other people for approval, particularly those who had previously questioned her or abandoned her. Only a select group of people, including her uncle, who had played a crucial role in assisting her in beginning her journey, were informed of the news through her student loan co-signing. One evening over dinner, Ellie confided in her uncle about her promotion and thanked him for helping her through her most trying years. Ellie's uncle grinned proudly and insisted that she was solely responsible for her achievement. He couldn't help but tell the rest of the family how pleased he was of her. Unfortunately, at a family get-together, this well-intentioned act started a series of events that Ellie hadn't expected. Unaware of their tense relationship, her uncle casually told her mother, Sophia, about her accomplishment. The news surprised Sophia, and her astonishment soon gave way to hatred. Ellie's accomplishment served as a reminder of her decisions. Without her, the daughter she had rejected had created a remarkable life. Sophia didn't waste any time in finding Ellie, not to offer her congratulations or patch up their strained relationship, but to take care of herself. Not long after, she arrived at Ellie's house bearing the burden of their unresolved history. After years of quiet, Ellie believed that her mother's sudden interest in her life was opportunistic and empty. She had earned her success on her own, and she had no intention of letting her mother's return overshadow her accomplishments. Ellie had no idea that this encounter would lead to a confrontation that would call into question everything she had fought so hard to overcome. Ellie opened her door after hearing an unexpected knock on a calm evening. She was startled to find Mark and her mother, Sophia, standing there. Stepfather. The scene evoked a wave of recollections. Even though she was shocked, Ellie remained calm and allowed them inside after she had put a lot of effort on burying them. She wanted to know what had caused them to come so quickly. Sophia made clumsy efforts at small chat as the discussion began stiffly after so many years of stillness. Her genuine aim, however, soon became apparent. Your success has been communicated to us. With a tone that was more demanding than proud, Sophia started. I'm happy to hear that you've made great progress, but we need your assistance immediately. Ellie's eyebrow went up. What can you help with? Mark said, his tone hard but steady. We're having financial difficulties as the twins prepare to enter college. We assumed you would want to support your family because you're doing so well. Ellie felt a knot in her gut. She was astounded by their request's boldness. They now expected her to step in and cover her siblings' tuition after years of desertion. As if history had never occurred. Are you serious? With a hint of incredulity in her voice, Ellie inquired. You threw me out of the house and left me on my own, and now you want me to pay for their college? Sophia's face became stern. Ellie, it wasn't like that. You know, it was difficult in those days. For the sake of the family, we had to make sacrifices. Ellie lost her fury. Offerings? You mean the sacrifice was me? When I most needed you, you left me. I had to learn how to survive and do all of my college coursework on my own. You now wish to use guilt to get me to assist you. As the disagreement intensified, tension in the room increased. Sophia attempted to defend their behavior by asserting that they had acted in accordance with their then-current best judgment. But that didn't sit well with Ellie. She told them about the years she worked at several jobs. The absence of family support as she was trying to establish a life for herself, as well as the loneliness she experienced around milestones and holidays. Ellie responded in a calm but acerbic tone. You made it clear that I wasn't a priority. And now, after all these years, you come here to demand money rather than to express regret or make apologies. Just because it suits you doesn't mean you have the right to change history. Mark tried to diffuse the tension by implying that Ellie was being too severe. Ellie, there are siblings. You want to see them succeed, don't you? Unwavering in her conviction, Ellie shook her head. You are in charge of them, not me. Years have passed since you made your decision, and now I'm making mine. I refuse to be coerced into tidying up your mess. Sophia became quite irritated. She said that Ellie owed them for the years that Sophia reared her alone and accused her of being ungrateful and self-centered. However, Ellie refused to allow remorse influence her choice and kept her ground. Ellie firmly remarked, This conversation is over, and got up from her chair. I made my decisions, and you made yours. Don't bother returning if you ever attempt to manipulate or guilt me again. Without another word, Sophia and Mark looked at one another in shock, knowing they had lost the war. Ellie stood by herself in her apartment as they departed, shutting the door behind them. She had an odd mixture of despair and relief. It had been a hard yet liberating confrontation. After refusing to let anybody over, she had at last established a distinct line. Ellie felt in charge of her life and her story for the first time in years. She was free of the burden of her history. Sophia wasn't prepared to let go of the altercation with her mother, but Ellie believed she had moved over it. Ellie's receptionist contacted her a few weeks later, and she seemed nervous. She replied softly, Your mother is here. She is refusing to leave and is asking to see you. Ellie's heart fell. She didn't want to get into another fight, especially at work. She inhaled deeply and instructed the receptionist to let Sophia know she wasn't available. Sophia eventually departed after a stressful few minutes, but Ellie knew that this was not the end of it. When Ellie got home from work the following day, things became more heated. Sophia was waiting at her front door when she arrived. Sophia's voice was strong and uncompromising as she stated, We need to talk. Ellie kept her distance and answered, I've said everything I need to say. You must go. However, When Ellie turned to unlock her door, Sophia Dean backed down. She was abruptly attacked by Sophia, who grabbed her arm and screamed that Ellie had destroyed her life. Ellie was able to push her away and make a help call, but things soon became violent. Sophia became enraged and lashed out, accusing Ellie of being responsible for all of her problems. Fortunately, Ellie's neighbors alerted the police after hearing the disturbance. Ellie's stepfather had already arrived and was attempting to soothe Sophia when the police came. However, it was too late. Ellie had had enough. The very next day, she applied for a restraining order and filed charges for the attack. Ellie felt that was the best way to keep herself safe, even if it was a hard choice. Ellie's lawyer assisted in getting a restraining order swiftly after the police recorded the incident. The lawsuit seemed like an essential move to get her calm back. Her life has been plagued by her mother's shadow for far too long. She could now put an end to this chapter permanently since she had legal protection and defined limitations. Although that wasn't the conclusion Ellie had hoped for, it was necessary for her to genuinely move on. Ellie sat in her apartment's silence. She considered her journey from a scared adolescent thrown into adulthood to a self-assured and successful CEO. It had not been an easy path for her. But each obstacle helped to mold her into the strong woman she is now. Although the encounter with her mother had been unpleasant, it had also provided insight. Ellie came to the realization that she had been burdened by her past for too long. The moment has come to let go. She was no longer defined by her mother's behavior, and it had no influence on her destiny, with a feeling of fresh intent. Ellie made the decision to go forward once more. She started looking for a new house, a larger, lighter one that would represent her achievement and development. It went beyond simply improving her living conditions. It was about letting go of the ghosts of her past and starting over. Ellie made the decision to put herself first and surround herself with people who truly cared about her. She was prepared to completely embrace the independent and strong life she had created, striding boldly into the future and letting go of the hurt of the past. Story 3. Madeline is 8 years younger than me, and my name is Heather, my younger sister. Our parents made it obvious that she was something special from the day she was born. "Take a look at those stunning green eyes," they would say. "Or have you ever seen golden curls this flawless?" In the meantime, I watched them swoon over her while standing in the corner with my unremarkable face and boring brown hair. Please understand that I cherished my sister. How could I not? She required continual care and attention because she was such a little, flawless thing. And guess who became her second mother? Both of our parents put in a lot of overtime to make finances meet. Yes, exactly. Me, honey, Heather. "Could you assist Maddie with her schoolwork?" Mom would ask. "Your arithmetic skills are amazing." Or, "Please, Heather, could you come get your sister from school? Both of us are stranded at work." I recall a certain night when Madeline was 6 and I was 14. I was attempting to complete my own pile of schoolwork while assisting her with her reading assignment. Madeline pushed the book away and complained, "I don't want to read anymore." "It's dull." Pulling the book back, I murmured, "Come on, Maddie. 3 more pages, please. We may then engage in that game. You enjoy it." Despite her frown, she took up the book once again. "Heather, you're no fun." Every day after school, Sarah is taken to the park by her older sister. Sarah's older sister is not required to volunteer at the library after school, though. It ached a little, but I answered. In order to support our family, I was already balancing school, housekeeping, and a part-time job at the local library. Our lives were like that. I was healthy, and Madeline was being herself, whatever it was that everyone wanted me to be. By the age of 16, I was working 3 jobs: online data entry at night, at the library after school, and at a cafe in the morning. Additionally, we were able to pay for Madeline's special tutoring, dancing lessons, and exquisite attire, which helped her become the most popular student in the school. I kept telling myself that things will improve, and that Madeline would eventually realize how much I had done for her, that perhaps, just possibly, our parents might regard me with the same pride they shown while discussing her. However, in retrospect, I see that I was only telling myself what I needed to hear to keep moving forward. I was aware that, unrelated to my academics, I had few alternatives when it came time to apply to colleges. In fact, those were rather nice. Despite working 3 jobs, I had even qualified for many scholarships at out-of-state institutions. You were admitted to Stanford. When the letter arrived, Mom had inquired. Her eyes briefly widened before becoming cloudy. But who would assist Maddie in preparing for college, honey? We are unable to pay for that type of tuition, you know. I recall holding that acceptance letter as I stood there in our kitchen, observing as Madeline's most recent artwork on the refrigerator caught Mom's eye. I kept my offer of a half scholarship to myself. What was the purpose? During my freshman year, I continued to be Madeline's personal support system, continued working at the cafe and library, and enrolled at City College. After rushing to work for my early classes, I would come home and assist Madeline with her schoolwork. On other evenings, I would stay up until 2 a.m., completing my own homework before waking up at 5 o'clock to work in the cafe. I eventually moved into my own apartment after graduating and got a respectable job at an accounting business. It was mine, a little one-bedroom apartment with erratic plumbing. I hoped that things would be different now. I might be able to start concentrating on my own life now. The phone call regarding Madeline's graduation gown then arrived. "Sweetheart." With that typical begging tone in her voice, Mom spoke. "You are aware of your sister's importance in this. She must have the ideal appearance for her graduation." The memory of my own graduation gown, a $30 clearance rack find that was just like Jenny Thompson's, caused a sour chuckle to rise in my throat. All night long, I had been attempting to stay out of her pictures. What is her desired price for the dress? I was already grabbing my credit card when I asked. She discovered this stunning designer item, though. "It's just $800. My coffee almost suffocated me." $800. That was about a month's worth of rent. However, I heard myself respond, "All right, Mom. I'll send the money over." Then the actual bombshell was dropped. One of the most costly private universities in the state, Preston University, had admitted Madeline. Moreover, our parents had, somehow, managed to save a sizable sum of money for her education. During a family meal, Dad proudly revealed, "We've been saving money since she was born. Our young daughter is entitled to the greatest education available." As I sat there with my fork frozen halfway to my lips, I thought back to all the student loans I still owed, the scholarships I had to decline, and the years I had worked many jobs to pay for my tuition at a public university. While I was saving, they had been saving for Madeline's schooling. However, it didn't end there. After Madeline began working at Preston, the requests began coming in a matter of weeks. "Heather, my dear." One evening, Mom called. "Maddie needs assistance with her flat. Pay the rent. Only until she settles in." Textbooks came next, followed by a laptop, since every other student has a MacBook. After that, she got a new iPhone because the one I had given her the previous year was humiliating. Food, cash. Clothing, cash. Every week, Madeline required my assistance for a new cause, a new emergency, or a new expenditure, and throughout everything. Madeline never expressed gratitude. She never once acknowledged what I was giving up for her. I was merely the family's ATM, giving her anything she needed without asking or objecting. My phone rang 3 years later while I was going over my monthly budget at my kitchen table. Mom sounded strangely excited. On the opposite end. "You should come over now, Heather. Maddie has some exciting news." When I got to my parents' house, Madeline was literally jumping off the walls and showing off a huge diamond ring. "I'm getting married." She let out a squeal. "I'm also graduating from college." Before I found my voice, there was a brief silence in the room. "What are you?" "Oh, Heather, don't seem so surprised." Madeline gave an eye roll. "In any case, college is dull. Jason has a lot of money, and our wedding will be the most spectacular." After all those years of struggle, I felt as though I was underwater. That much money. I just lost my money. Waiting for my parents to say something, anything at all, I stared at them. However, they simply sat there, grinning at Madeline like though she had just said that she had cured cancer. "How about your degree?" I was able to inquire. "Everyone has made a significant investment." "Heather, I'm very sorry. What a buzzkill you are," Madeline cut in. "That's the reason you're still unmarried. You're usually so dull and realistic. For the next hour, allow me to share my wedding ideas with you." As Madeline described her ideal wedding, which would surpass the nuptials of all her friends, I sat there in a stupor. Everything had to be flawless, including the dress, the flowers, and the location, which reportedly meant spending a lot of money. Then the bomb was dropped. Dad cleared his throat and said, "Honey, Although we have a loan, it is insufficient. We also need you to contribute since you are a member of the family. Mom done? After all, it's your sister's special day. I asked myself, how much? As if I were experiencing an out-of-body sensation. Your part should be covered by $20,000. Madeline stated nonchalantly, as though she were requesting a $5 loan for coffee. I'm not sure what made me say yes. It may have been habit. Perhaps it was the way the tears filled Mom's eyes. Perhaps it was just simpler than fighting. However, I accepted, and the next day the funds were removed from my account. They weren't finished, though. In fact, dear, during our upcoming family meal, Mom mentioned that we've been considering granting you a modest loan to assist with the additional costs. For once in my life, something broke inside of me. No, I answered firmly. Not at all. I'm saving money for a home loan. I also have to consider my future. When did you start being so self-centered? Madeline's flawless face twisted into an unpleasant frown as she demanded. My hands trembled beneath the table, but I refused to back down. Maddie, I've handed you $20,000. My limit is that. The ensuing hush was deafening. Then, in that reassuring tone I was so familiar with, Mom spoke out. The least you can do is assist with the arrangements if you are no longer willing to provide financial support. I sat back on my shoulders and nodded, already feeling the usual weight of duty. However, something had changed. I had refused them for the first time in my life. Even though it was a minor triumph, it felt enormous. Those weeks became a nightmare. Madeline's texts, each requesting more money for a new crucial wedding detail, kept buzzing on my phone. I discovered the ideal flowers, Heather. The arrangements barely cost $3,000. They'll give them to another bride if I don't have the money before tomorrow. God, oh God, this band is incredible. I must have them. They played at Chelsea's wedding. They want $5,000. Is it possible for you to provide the funds tonight? The location I had in mind is available, but we must pay a deposit now. It's only $8,000. You'll manage it properly? I got a virtual assistant job as a second career, working on the weekends and at night. My days at my accounting work became a never-ending haze of spreadsheets, making wedding plans during my lunch break when I did get one, and then spending more time in front of a computer at night. One day, I was interrupted in the break room by my coworker, Jenny. Are you all right, Heather? You appear different. I hardly recognized myself when I saw my reflection in the glass. When I lose weight, the dark bags beneath my eyes disappear and hang loosely. I couldn't recall the last time I'd had time to get my hair trimmed, so I quickly pushed it back. Naturally, I answered, I'm fine. My sister's wedding is keeping me busy. I was ready to fall asleep that night when I climbed into bed at 1 a.m, my eyes burning from gazing at screens all day. Another message from Madeline appeared on my phone. For the reception, I have discovered the most incredible ice sculpture. Just $2,500. They'll sell it to someone else if the money isn't made before morning. I buried my face in my pillow and shut off my phone, fighting back tears of tiredness. I had already covered the cost of the band, the venue, the food, and the flowers. How much more is there perhaps? Mom phoned a week later with the response. We need to have a serious family conversation, honey. Would you be able to visit us tonight? After work, wondering what else they may want from me, I dragged myself to their place. I had already maxed up my credit card and depleted my savings account. Knowing that it will soon be over was the only thing that kept me going. Madeline was splayed out on the couch with travel mags all around her when I went in. She was examining a beautiful catalog with her parents, who were sitting close by. Oh, what a wonderful resort. Madeline pointed to a page with a scream. Observe the bungalows above the ocean. Additionally, each suite has an own butler. I watched from the doorway as she turned the pages of what seemed like an upscale travel guide. When I knew what was about to happen, my gut nodded. What am I doing here exactly? My voice was hardly steady as I asked. You needed me to come over, but why? Madeline's syrupy, sweet grin, which I had come to fear, appeared as she looked up from her magazine. Oh, we're simply choosing your wedding present. I blinked. What am I? Your wedding present? She repeated carefully, as though I was unable to grasp simple English. I made the decision that you would cover the cost of our Maldivian honeymoon. The room began to swirl. I steadied myself by holding onto the doorframe. Do you mean me, after I've already paid for everything? Come on, Heather. Mom added. Avoid being theatrical. Is it dramatic? My voice broke. All of my money has already been spent on this wedding. Well, Madeline shrugged. It's not like you have anything else to spend it on. It's just $24,000 too. Something broke inside of me. 29 years of being the human ATM, the obliging sister, and the decent daughter. In that instant, everything fell apart. Just $24,000. I just yelled, "Are you aware of the amount of work I put into your priceless wedding? Do you have any idea?" Dad told Mel to quiet down, Heather. I'm not going to be quiet. I'm finished. I'm all finished with this. Now I was trembling. Anger that has been suppressed for years is now coming to the surface. You are nothing more than a conceited, pampered brat. Madeline. Additionally, I'm tired of putting up with your constant demands. I need to think about my own life. An horrible grin distorted Madeline's features. Your own life? What kind of life? Heather, you're 29, an elderly maid. Have you recently examined yourself in the mirror? Why aren't you dating? You look awful. Why would a typical man desire you? Like physical strikes, the word struck. However, I refuse to back down. I've been working 2 jobs every day to pay for your wedding, which is why I look awful. Your incessant demands have prevented me from getting a full night's sleep in months. Madeline spit out. You're simply envious. I'm jealous since you'll die alone and I'm getting married. I'm envious since you're just, and I'm attractive and prosperous. You. That was it. The dam cracked. Utterly successful. You left the college early. I contributed to the cost. Lovely. As ugly as they come, your soul is. You have never in your life worked a day. No matter what I've done for you, you've never expressed gratitude. You believe that everything in the world is due to you. And what do you know? I've had enough of your conceited little world. Madeline's words trailed behind me as I turned and ran out of the door. No one will ever marry you because you're nothing more than a jealous wet mill wonder. I heard Mom and Dad joining in behind me, screaming insults and accusations at my back. However, I didn't turn around for the first time in my life. I didn't say I was sorry. I refused to give in. My phone was overflowing with texts by the time I arrived home that evening. At least 30 SMS had been sent by Mom, each one more scathing than the previous. You have no right to talk to your sister in that manner. You're nothing more than a self-centered, unappreciative daughter after everything we've done for you. How could you spoil the day for your sister? After staring at the messages until the words were indistinguishable, I took an action I had never taken before. Something freeing and terrible at the same time. I turned on my laptop and began emailing the location. I must withdraw my payment to the florist and cancel the reservation. Kindly cancel the catering company's order for the wedding arrangements. I'm calling off the band's meal service for the next date. Regretfully, I have to cancel each reservation individually. Everything I had planned for Madeline's wedding was methodically undone. My head was clear, but my hands were trembling. I no longer cared that the wedding was just 2 weeks away. I felt lighter with every cancellation. Then everything went haywire. I banned my mother's number, and my phone began to ring constantly. After I prevented her from using Dad's phone, she began using their landline instead. Email, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and every other medium sent a deluge of messages. They were all blocked by me. Please give your Aunt Susan a call, Heather. How come you won't respond? Calls from Uncle Jim? Rachel, your cousin, is furious with you. How could you harm your own sister in this way? The calls were coming from all directions. Distant family members I hadn't spoken to in a long time. I hardly knew any of my family or acquaintances, even the prospective in-laws of Madeline. I completely stopped picking up my phone. Then came the in-person meetings. The yelling came from underneath my window as I was attempting to fall asleep. Heather, now go down here. It was the harsh, irate voice of Mom. This has to be fixed. You self-centered witch. Madeline was that person. Hours passed while they stood there, alternating between irate demands and heartfelt entreaties. To block them out, I cranked up my TV. I talked to George, the concierge for our building, the next morning. Don't allow them in, please. Silently, I said. What people say doesn't matter to me. Here, they are not welcome. George nodded empathetically, having seen their actions the previous evening. Miss Robertson, don't be concerned. I'll see to that. My buddy Kelly phoned a week later. Did you hear the news? With caution, she inquired. To pay for everything, your parents had to take out another emergency loan. You canceled. Without charging premium fees, none of the suppliers would complete the task at such short notice. They paid nearly twice as much for everything in the end. I sat there and let that to sink in. There was a greater part of me that felt guilty, the part that had been programmed since I was a youngster to handle everything and make sure everyone else was okay. The portion that had at last found its voice was aware that I had made the correct choice. I came upon these while browsing Instagram a month after the incident. The wedding pictures of Madeline. They were there because a mutual acquaintance had liked them, even though I hadn't intended to look. The extravagant wedding that my sister had insisted on had become something else entirely. Simple grocery store flowers had been utilized in place of the $3,000 flower arrangements that had been used in our parents' backyard, a 5-star hotel location. There was a laptop and speakers on a folding table, but no sign of the pricey band. Even though Madeline looked stunning in her fantasy dress, there was something strange about each picture. Her eyes were tight with disappointment, and her smile was forced. There were no honeymoon pictures taken. Along with the rest of her ambitious ambitions, the Maldives dream had perished. For the first time in years, I shut down Instagram and made an effort to move on with my life. I was taking care of myself, getting regular sleep, eating healthily, and even beginning to resemble myself once more. Then my phone rang 3 months after the wedding. Dad was there. Heather. In some way, his voice seemed older and worn out. We must speak. Would you be able to visit? I agreed with him because of something in his tone. It felt different when I got to my folks' place. Sitting on the couch, Mom and Dad were deflated. Dad was the first to speak. Madeline's divorce is imminent. Like smoke, the words lingered in the air. I waited. Jason and her. Mom's voice broke. Since the wedding, they have been at odds. He never stops griping about how humiliating it was that they couldn't even have a legitimate band, and how cheap everything was. The canceled honeymoon has angered him. The problem is, Dad went on, gazing at his hands. 2 loans were taken out for that wedding. We're in quite deep even with the scaled-down version. Before they ever said anything, Heather, I knew what was going to happen. We hoped Mom started. No, I responded firmly and softly. But where are your parents, Heather? I'm your daughter, too. The person for whom you never saved money. The person who put herself through college by working 3 jobs. The one who spent all of her savings on a wedding that never should have happened. In startled stillness, they sat. We were now aware of our partial error. The way we treated you, Dad stated gently. I straightened my skirt and got to my feet, inaccurate to some extent. In every way you have been mistaken. Concerning money, Madeline, and me, regarding life. Perhaps one day you'll see how mistaken you were. However, I hope that loans go well for you in the meanwhile. I noticed my parents in the rearview mirror as I was leaving. I didn't glance back as I stood in their doorway, appearing little and lost for the first time. Life has a humorous way of revealing people's true selves. I was having coffee with Kelly 6 months after Madeline's divorce, when she paused, swirling her latte with extraordinary focus. Do you know anything about Madeline? She asked thoughtfully. After the lengthy talk with my folks, I shook my head. I had kept my distance and concentrated on starting over. Kelly went on. She moved back in with your parents. She is not employed. She claims that the divorce has left her too devastated to work, but she has been seeing a new man every week, based on what I've heard, as well as your parents, I interrupted, to guess. They are totally behind her. Kelly gave a nod. Covering all costs. Her clothing, her automobile, and her evenings out. Even after those debts for the wedding, it didn't surprise me. Certain patterns are constant. Months passed. For the first time in years, I was able to concentrate on my primary career after quitting my second job. I began to look after myself. I purchased clothing that wasn't exclusively for work, took a yoga class, and had regular haircuts. People began remarking on how different I seemed. Then the phone rang. It was unexpected. It was Mom, speaking in a tiny, strange voice. I have something to tell you, Heather. I must apologize to you. I took a seat and prepared myself. Madeline. She got to know a rich businessman. Mom's voice broke. Yesterday she went out with him. She maxed up all of our credit cards before she departed, but we're not sure where. Each and every one. Between us there was stillness. I started, Mom, but she cut me off. No, Let me finish, please. Now your father and I are deeply in debt. We're not phoning to solicit money, though. We'll solve it on our own. That was something we ought to have done long ago. I wanted to apologize for everything. The apology was not flawless. It was something, but it didn't undo years of manipulation and favoritism. I have no idea where Madeline is these days. I occasionally come across remnants of her on social media. A location check-in there, a tagged photo here. However, she floats from place to place and from person to person, like a ghost. On holidays, I send quick texts to my folks. Happy Christmas, cheers to your birthday, cheers to the new year. It's shallow, but at the moment, it's all I can do. The problem with eventually escaping harmful patterns, however, is this. There's always something greater to fill the gaps in life. James and I met in a coffee shop near a bookshop 3 months ago. We struck up a conversation as he was reading my favorite book. In addition to being compassionate and accomplished in his own right, he sees me, which is the most essential thing, truly notices me. While organizing some old boxes last night, I came upon a picture of Madeline and me when we were kids. She was 5 years old. We were both grinning at the camera when I was 13, oblivious to what was about to happen. Despite my want to retain it, I returned it to its box. It's preferable to leave some memories behind. James is working on his laptop across from me at my favorite coffee shop while I type this, periodically looking up to smile at me. I came to a startling realization. Occasionally, getting everything you believed you wanted isn't the key to a happy ending. Sometimes it's about letting go of the things that have been preventing you from moving forward. Story 4. As Sarah Martinez entered the Grand Plaza Hotel, she brushed down her plain blue dress. Her heart was pounding eagerly. She couldn't help but grin despite everything, especially because today was her daughter Emma's wedding. The foyer was the perfect setting, glistening with crystal and marble. Mom would be chosen by her prospective son-in-law's family. Emma's voice could be heard across the foyer. Sarah turned to find her kid running toward her while still dressed normally. You succeeded. Emma, however, had a tightness about her. Her smile was accompanied with attentiveness in her shoulders, something Sarah was all too familiar with. I made it, of course, my dear. Your big day wouldn't be missed by me. Sarah extended her arm to embrace her daughter. Emma, however, stepped back a little and looked around the foyer. I have something to tell you, Mom. Emma's hand started to ring. James's household. The seating configurations have been modified. Sarah felt a knot in her gut. Since Patricia Thompson, James's mother, took over the wedding arrangements, she had been anticipating something similar. What changes? You are seated at the rear table. Emma spoke hastily, her words stumbling out close to the kitchen door. Patricia claims that the photographer's setup is to blame, but before Sarah could answer, she walked away, reluctant to look her mother in the eyes. Their chat was interrupted by an acerbic voice. What are you doing down here, Emma? You must be in the bridal suite right now. With her high-end shoes clicking on the marble floor, Patricia Thompson walked confidently across the lobby. She glanced at Sarah with hardly disguised contempt. Oh, are you present? Sarah's back straightened. Hi, Patricia. It's a beautiful hotel. A chilly smile curled Patricia's lips. Yes, we did want James and Emma to have the best possible life. And with that, she looked at Emma. Your hair appointment was set for 5 minutes ago, darling. Keeping everyone waiting is not what you want. Emma paused and glanced at her mother and her future mother-in-law. I apologize for that, Mom, Sarah whispered softly. Go on. Today is your day. Don't be concerned about me. Patricia's mask fell away as Emma rushed off. Listen, she whispered in a low, sharp voice. Let's be honest, you don't belong in our group, even if Emma insisted on having you here. The Thompsons need to uphold their reputation, Sarah spoke steadily. My daughter is the reason I'm here. Indeed. From the rear of the room, you may assist her. We don't want the wedding pictures to be ruined by your humble situation. You understand? I'm sure. Patricia had a piercing grin. Oh, and we've made arrangements for your table to serve the workers' lunch. It felt right. Sarah was left standing by herself in the spacious foyer as Patricia turned and left. She let herself feel the full force of the embarrassment for a time. She reflected on the additional hours she worked as a nurse at the hospital to support Emma's schooling. regarding the evening she had devoted to assisting Emma in preparing for her entrance examinations to medical school. When she was accepted, she was ecstatic. Her daughter was now getting married into the Thompson family, who run the state's biggest hospital network. All of a sudden, Sarah's decades of labor were in vain. The wedding was scheduled to happen in a few hours, so she made her way to the ballroom. It was a beautiful room. The light fell on crystal chandeliers. A string quartet was setting up in the corner, and each table was decked out with fresh flowers. However, she noticed that her table was partially obscured by a large pillar near the swinging kitchen doors as she moved toward the back of the room. A young woman dressed as a hotel employee, Mrs. Martin, came up to her. "From Event Services, I'm Jenny. You'll be seated here," we were assured. Seeing pity in Jenny's eyes, Sarah nodded. "Yes, exactly. It is." Jenny looked around as she dropped her voice. "While the staff is here, I wanted to let you know, everyone is aware of who you are. When you were working that awful 30-hour shift during the crisis last year, my sister was working at County General. Her life was saved by you." Sarah gave a startled blink. She recalled how the hospital had been overrun that evening by a huge traffic jam on the highway. She had worked until she was barely able to stand, staying late past her shifts. "We simply," Jenny went on, "we believe that the way they are treating you is incorrect. We also wanted you to know that you should ask for help if you need it. You have the support of the entire staff." Sarah stood there for a moment, taking in what Jenny had said. Then she had a memory, something that might make all the difference. Reaching into her purse, she took her phone out. With a slight smile on her lips, she said, "Actually, there is something you could help me with, but first I need to make a call." As she dialed a familiar number, Sarah watched the Thompson family sweeping through the ballroom, directing staff and making demands. Patricia was at the center of it all, gesturing dramatically about some perceived flaw in the table settings. "Hello, Marcus, it's Sarah Martinez. Remember that favor you want me. I think it's time to cash it in." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah watched from her corner as the ballroom filled with guests all dressed in designer clothes and dripping with jewelry. She couldn't help but notice how the Thompson family greeted each arrival with elaborate embraces and air kisses, at least until they spotted her. "Is that her?" She overheard one woman whisper to Patricia, the mother who works as a nurse. Patricia's response was just loud enough to carry. "Yes, unfortunately. But don't worry. We've managed to keep her out of sight. Can't have anything spoiling James's big day." Sarah checked her watch. Any minute now. The first sign that something was wrong came when Jenny and 3 other servers suddenly removed their uniforms, revealing street clothes underneath. They walked straight through the middle of the ballroom and toward the exit. "Where are you going?" Patricia called out, her voice sharp. "We haven't even served the appetizers." Jenny turned her head held high. "We quit before Patricia could respond." More staff members began following suit. The bartenders packed up their tools. The valet parking personnel walked off their stations. Even the wedding coordinator closed her laptop and headed for the door. "What is the meaning of this?" Patricia's face had become an intriguing shade of crimson. "You can't just leave. We have a contract." "Actually," Andy's voice said from the doorway, "they can." Marcus Chan, CEO of the hotel company, strolled into the ballroom. His arrival grabbed instant attention, and Sarah had to fight a smile as she saw Patricia's countenance transform from wrath to perplexity to desperate appeal. "Mr. Chen, Patricia, hurry forward. There must be some error. We reserved this facility months ago, and suddenly your crew is following my exact commands." Marcus finished for her. He turned to address the crowded gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, but the Grand Plaza will not be able to hold this function today. All employees have been told to stop working right away." Chaos broke out in the ballroom. The guests start muttering. James's father was yelling about Emma and attorneys. "Emma looked as if she would pass out, ma'am." Emma moved to Sarah's side through the throng. "What's going on?" Marcus saw Sarah before she could respond and gave her a kind grin. "Sarah? You're there." Because Patricia had spun around so quickly, Sarah was afraid she may injure herself. "You two are acquainted. Know one another?" Marcus chuckled. "My daughter's life has been saved by Sarah Martin. Discovered an uncommon ailment last year that had gone unnoticed by other medical professionals. Remained with her all night, keeping a close eye on her." He looked at Sarah. "Back then, I told you. Do you need anything? At any moment. I meant it. For the visitors, everything were beginning to come together. Sarah could see Patricia's face light up with terror as she recognized her error. But not just that. Marcus's words carried on into the now quiet chamber. Sarah Martin is a member of our hospital group's Charity Foundation's board of directors. She has played a key role in allocating millions of dollars to impoverished areas. He shook his head when she called to complain about the treatment she was receiving at her own daughter's wedding. Let's simply say that the Grand Plaza isn't associated with such conduct. Emma's eyes were watering as she gazed at her mother. I didn't know, Mom. Why did you never speak up? Sarah gave her daughter's hand a squeeze. Because, dear, I wanted you to go your own path. I never wanted your decisions to be influenced by my connections. She stopped and surveyed the space. However, I also want no one to treat us as inferior. This is absurd. Patricia had a high-pitched voice. You cannot just call off our wedding. Are you aware of our expenses? Oh, Sarah calmly remarked. I'm not shutting it down. She gave Marcus a nod, and he pointed to the employees who were standing at the doors. New kings of waiters entered the ballroom, and they started wheeling in new serving carts. I'm taking over. Patricia opened and shut her mouth. Sarah went ahead without making any noise. If Emma and James still want to be married, they will. But with new seating layouts and new administration. At last, James, who had been silently watching everything happen, came forward. I'm really sorry, Mrs. Martinez. I was unaware that my parents were mistreating you. I'm sorry I didn't defend you and your mother sooner, he said, turning to Emma. With tears running down her cheeks, Emma glanced between her mother and her fiancé. I'm sorry to Mom. I ought to have spoken out. There would be no more excuses, Sarah asserted firmly. You still have today. Together. Let's make it a success. She looked around at the visitors. Everyone is invited to remain and celebrate Emma and James's wedding, provided they are aware that everyone is on an equal footing in this space. Everyone is related. What ensued was an amazing metamorphosis. The other guests started to unwind after being released from the environment of pretense and judgment, but the Thompson family, completely humbled, withdrew to secluded corners. And Emma. As the ceremony started, Emma was beaming with joy as she gazed at her mother. More sincere than it would have been, but a little late. Sarah settled on the first row. She glanced at Jenny, who had changed back into her uniform with the other workers, and left. Sarah grinned as she considered how different today had been from her expectations. Getting even wasn't always the finest form of retaliation. It was about taking a position and proving your value. However, everyone was still in for one more surprise. Sarah was quietly pleased as she saw the changed atmosphere as the event got underway. The visitors were treated to a background performance by the string quartet. In the aftermath of the afternoon's discoveries, Miguel Freely, the previous social hierarchies forgotten. Patricia Thompson was completely deflated as she sat at the table she had given to Sarah, which was close to the kitchen doors. Richard, her husband, was constantly looking at his phone, perhaps attempting to gauge the social harm caused by the day's events. It nearly made Sarah feel terrible for them. Nearly. Mrs. Martin looked anxious yet resolute as James walked up to her table. Could we have a private conversation for a bit? After nodding, Sarah trailed her new son-in-law to a peaceful area of the ballroom. James inhaled deeply before continuing. He started out by saying, I want you to know that I've made some decisions and am leaving my family's hospital administration position. Sarah's brows went up in shock. No need to do that, James. It is, he said. Actually, I've been considering this for some time. It was expected of me to pursue a career in healthcare administration. However, he erects his shoulders. Like Emma, I want to go medical school. My goal is to personally assist others, like you do. Sarah's face lit up with a loving smile. I never heard that from Emma. I didn't tell her. James said that he was worried about disappointing his parents. However, after witnessing your graceful and resilient handling of everything today, I came to the realization that I have been living my life in an attempt to win over the wrong people. Marcus Chan was at Sarah's elbow before she could reply. Someone here would like to talk to you, Sarah. He pointed to the door of the ballroom, where a refined older woman was waiting. When Sarah recognized Dr. Catherine Reynolds, the state's current health commissioner, her heart skipped a beat. Reynolds greeted her party and remarked, Sarah Martin is doctor. Even though I'm fashionably late, I'm so happy I could make it. As they hurried past Commissioner Reynolds, Patricia and Richard Thompson, who had been observing from their table, nearly fell over themselves. Patricia exclaimed, "What a surprise, Honor." "Patricia, save it." Coolly, the commissioner interrupted her. "I've come to talk to Sarah." She smiled and turned back to Sarah. "Next week is the board meeting, and I wanted to talk about this face-to-face. After reviewing your proposal, we are doing more than simply approving the new community health initiative. The funding is being doubled. The timing of the Thompsons' jazz drop was flawless. But more than that," said Dr. Reynolds. "Next year I will be retiring, and the governor has been soliciting suggestions for my successor." She looked at Sarah thoughtfully. "If you're interested, I'd like to put your name forward." Everyone was straining to hear the conversation as the ballroom fell silent once more. Emma's hand slipped into Sarah's. Not even her daughter's approach had caught her attention. I whispered to Mom, "You never mentioned any of this to me." Sarah gave her daughter's hand a squeeze. "Our work should, in my opinion, speak for itself. I was simply working extra shifts all those nights. In addition, I was establishing connections, developing initiatives, and figuring out how to assist more people. I never required the praise. All I wanted to do was change things. And that's precisely why you're ideal for the job," Dr. Reynolds stated firmly. Patricia Thompson appeared on the verge of passing out. "However, she's only a nurse, though." "Only a nurse." Dr. Reynolds' eyebrow went up. "Just a nurse, Mrs. Thompson. The network of hospitals in your entire family is nothing compared to what Sarah Martinez has done for healthcare in this state. She was saving lives and transforming the system from the inside out, while you were organizing galas and worrying about your social standing." Jane moved forward. "I'd really like to know more about the Community Health Initiative, Commissioner Reynolds. I intend to submit applications to both medical schools." Patricia cut in with a high-pitched voice. "However, you are expected to assume control of the family business." "No, Mom." James firmly. "Like Emma, I'm going to forge my own path. As Mrs. Martin has instructed her to do." The tone of the reception was very different from what anyone had anticipated, but it persisted into the evening. After playing all of their social cards, the Thompsons withdrew to their table. Sarah, meanwhile, was surrounded by people who wanted to talk about her work and their state's healthcare future, while she observed Emma's first dance with James. Sarah thought back on how this day had not gone as she had feared. She hadn't come to prove herself or to embarrass the Thompsons. She had just refused to let their bigotry devalue her. Jenny showed up beside her, holding a champagne glass. "You are aware." The young waiter grinned as she spoke. "My sister said you were an angel when she told me about the nurse who saved her life. I believe you may be a ninja after all." Sarah took the champagne and laughed. Getting even isn't always the best form of retaliation. It's about taking a stand and allowing your deeds to do the talking. Emma discovered her mother by herself on the hotel terrace, gazing out at the city lights as the reception came to an end later that evening. "Mom," Emma spoke quietly, "I sincerely apologize for everything. I've been attempting to blend in with James's world by separating myself from you, and not just today. I lost sight of the person you trained me to be." Sarah looked at her daughter, not the bride in her pricey dress, but the little child who, wanting to be like her mother, would often nod off while reading medical textbooks. Sarah pulled her daughter into an embrace and added, "You never have to apologize for trying to find your way. However, keep in mind that your worth is not determined by your spouse or the family you join. It lies in your actions, your interactions with others, and the impact you have on the world." Emma wiped a tear from her eye. "Taking good care of her cosmetics. I know that now more than ever." She stopped, then said with a little smile, "Health Commissioner Martinez." Sarah laughed. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Why not? After today, I'd say anything is possible." Sarah experienced a profound sense of calm as she and her daughter stood there gazing out over the city. Unaware that she had established a place of respect, dignity, and genuine achievement for herself, the Thompsons had attempted to put her in her proper place. Marcus sent Sarah a text the following morning, and Sarah's phone buzzed. "The employees are unable to stop discussing yesterday. At the Grand Plaza, you have become a legendary figure." Sarah typed her response with a grin. Retaliation isn't always the greatest kind of retaliation. Living your truth and sharing it with others is what it is all about. Sarah considered all the routes that have brought her to this point as she put her phone down. No amount of social snobbery could ever top the foundation that years of diligent labor, silent devotion, and unflinching honesty have constructed. The Thompsons had viewed her as only a nurse, failing to recognize that each person she touched, each program she established, and each friendship she developed had left a legacy much more significant than their fleeting position. She hadn't had to destroy them after all. All she had to do was stand in her own light and allow the truth to shine through everything else. Regardless of the commissioner's nomination, she still had patients in need of her care as she got ready for another day at the hospital. Knowing that proving oneself correct may sometimes be a greater triumph than proving others incorrect, Sarah Martin grinned. Story 5. The gold letters on the gleaming invitation on my desk taunted me as I gazed at it. I had to learn about my own mother's birthday party, Linda's 55th birthday celebration, from my father's secretary, who believed I already knew I didn't. I'm Maria, and I've been the Holmes family's unseen daughter for the past 8 years. Teresa, my sister, enjoys the attention that comes with our mother's admiration. Behind the scenes, I've been quietly running our family company. Have you viewed the invitation? The voice of my closest buddy Aiden crackled across the speaker of my phone. Yes. Angela from Dad's office sent it to me just now. I made an effort to speak steadily, but my shaking was obvious. Are you certain? What? Aiden inquired. I'm sure once you do this. I glanced at the invitation once again, but my name was noticeably missing from its tasteful layout. It's time for everyone to realize who I really am. When I got there, the celebration was in full flow. Glasses of crystal clinked. My mother stood in the middle of it all, grinning at Teresa as if she were hanging the moon, while fake laughter reverberated off marble walls. Maria. Dad motioned me to come. His face showed relief. You succeeded. Before I could answer, Mom's voice pierced the throng. Everyone. Everybody. There's some amazing news from Teresa. There was silence in the room. Knowing what was going to happen, I immediately tightened my hold on my champagne glass. Last week, Teresa oversaw the Richardson merger. Mom's pride filled her words. Officially, this is our greatest offer of the year. There was a burst of applause. In an attempt to mask the bitter taste in my tongue, I took a long swallow of champagne. I had planned that merger for 3 months, managing discussions and working through the night. Only the last signing had Teresa present. You ought to speak up. Beside me, Aiden muttered. He would accompany me. I'm here to help you emotionally in this wolf lair. What's the point? As she came toward us, swishing her designer came. Have you been informed about the merger? Well done. I was able to make the word taste like ash. Additionally, I appreciate you fixing that presentation last week. It was brilliant, according to Mom, but she lowered her voice. Could you simplify the financial projections a little bit the next time? A few of the board members appeared perplexed. They were perplexed as you were unable to adequately respond to their inquiries. I whispered. What was that? Nothing. I'm sorry. Mom showed there and blocked my way as I turned to go. Sweetheart, Teresa. Mr. Peterson wants to discuss potential opportunities for you in the London office. London office? I blurted out. But that's my project. I've been developing that expansion for Maria. Mom cut me off, her smile never reaching her eyes. This is hardly the time or place. Besides, Teresa has shown exceptional leadership skills. You should learn from her example. Learn from her. I laughed, the sound harsh and sour. Do you even know what she truly does at the company? The discussion around us quieted. Teresa's grin faded. Maria, Dad cautioned quietly. No, I'd want to know. I looked at my mother. Are you aware of the author of the merger proposal? Who negotiated conditions for 3 months? Who stays up late to make sure your darling Teresa looks nice every night? Mom's expression grew stern. I believe you've consumed too much alcohol. I don't believe I've had nearly enough. With a harsh clink, I put my glass down. What's humorous, do you? Without my notes, Teresa was unable to even provide the board with basic profit forecasts. Mom said, Enough. Maybe you should stop being envious if you can't enjoy your sister's accomplishment without feeling jealous. Aiden's reassuring hand touched my arm. Mom, I'm not envious. I'm worn out. I'm sick of being invisible, whereas Teresa claims to be the author of my work. You dare. Teresa took a step forward. I truly deserve everything. I took my phone out. Is it time to give Mr. Richardson a call? Find out from him who was in charge of the merger talks. There was utter silence in the room. Although the guests feigned being engrossed in their beverages, I could see they were listening intently to everything that was said. Maria, Dad whispered softly, perhaps we ought to go outside. Why? Mom gave me a chilly look. This is the purpose of parties, isn't it? Family unity? Maybe you shouldn't even think of yourself as a member of our family if you can't act like a good daughter, Mom snarled. The remark struck like a punch to the body. Teresa appeared astounded as well. Mom. She let out a gasp. I elongated my back. Determination crystallized from years of suffering. What do you know? You're correct. This isn't a family, therefore I shouldn't think of myself as a member. It's a Teresa fan club. Maria. Dad got things started. No, everything is all right. I reached for my handbag. I'll leave. But Mama, don't forget this time. Don't forget what you said tonight. After I left, Aiden waited until we got to my car before he said, Are you all right? Maria? That's screwed up. Your own mom. Everything is all right. But I interrupted. It wasn't. And we both knew it. I'm accustomed to it. Teresa sent me another email on my PC, requesting that I check her presentation for the board meeting tomorrow. She would claim credit for the same presentation, as usual. With trembling palms, I leaned against the cool metal. Give Bruce a call. Inform him that I would want to meet tomorrow morning. Will you actually do it? I reflected on what my mother had said. Teresa's phony pity and years of being ignored. Indeed. They need to experience what it's like to be invisible. I saw my father looking out the window as we drove away. His face was inscrutable. He would soon see why I had to take this action. They will all realize soon. Mom, happy birthday. I spoke to the darkness in a whisper. Since this is the final party you will throw as CEO of this firm, I hope you had a good time. I laid the papers over Bruce's desk and noticed that his office was cooler than normal. Sitting next to me, Aiden used his iPad to browse through financial documents. Mom has been really busy. As he adjusted his reading glasses, Bruce spoke. Under Teresa's name, these unapproved transfers were made to the London office. I'm done, but have a look at the autographs. Aiden bent over. Teresa doesn't own those. No. I took out another piece of paper. For months, Mom has been falsifying Teresa's signature on official documents, most likely in an attempt to establish Teresa's qualifications. Bruce rubbed his eyes and took off his glasses. Maria, this is serious. Alongside the contract your father signed, we were interrupted by a knock. Kendall. In the doorway stood our HR director and Teresa's closest friend. She had a pallid face. I must speak with you, she said. You all. She shut the door behind her after I gave her a nod. I can no longer remain silent. Kendall exploded. Mommy. She intends to compel your father to retire early. She desires Teresa to be appointed CEO right away. What? The word was barely audible. There's more. Kendall took her phone out. Take a listen. Yesterday, I recorded it. The room echoed with Mom's voice. We'll have to deal with Maria after James leaves. Look for a way to undermine her efforts. Get her to give up. Teresa must be the sole surviving heir. The response from Teresa's voice made my hands clench into fists. But Mom, Maria does a good job. The business requires. Instead of someone who hides in their office doing paperwork, the company needs strong leadership. Believe me, sweetheart, I am aware of what is ideal. Kendall stopped the recording. I'm sorry. Maria, I should have come forward sooner. Why now? Aiden asked, his protective instinct kicking in. Because what they're doing is wrong. Kendall met my eyes. And because I saw what happened at the party. You deserve better. Bruce cleared his throat. This recording, combined with the forged documents and your father's contract. We have everything we need. Wait, I stood up pacing. Why would Teresa agree to this? She knows she can't handle the company alone. Power is enticing, Bruce murmured quietly. And your mother can be quite convincing. It buzzed on my phone. A text from Dad. Your mother's called an emergency board meeting for next week. Something about succession planning. They're traveling fast, Aiden noted. I turned to Bruce. How fast can we arrange everything? Give me 2 days. I'll have all the material ready, including proof of the forgeries. Make it 1 day. I showed him Dad's SMS. We need to go quicker. Kendall moved forward. I have access to all the HR files. I am able to assist. For what reason would you jeopardize your career? Teresa is a friend of mine, so I had to ask. However, this is incorrect. Everyone, even Teresa, is being manipulated by your mother. It must be stopped by someone. Once more, my phone buzzed. Teresa, this time. Mom is behaving strangely. She claims that I must sign certain documents pertaining to London. Could you examine them first? The time was ideal. Reading over my shoulder, Aiden murmured. I returned the type. Yes, in an hour, meet me at the office. This is your opportunity, stated Bruce. Make her acknowledge the frauds. Keep a record of everything. An hour later, I watched Teresa go over the London paperwork while I sat across from her in my office. These figures don't appear right. The signature. She scowled. This isn't mine, Maria, I am aware. My phone was on the desk. Recording. Your mother has been falsifying your signatures. Teresa's expression fell flat. It was only temporary, she replied. That when I was ready, she would make everything right. What are you prepared for? What's crazy, do you? I opened the attachment and said, Tomorrow, Teresa will be presenting my market study to the board, the one that took me 3 weeks to assemble. Additionally, her mother will most likely prepare another celebratory dinner for her. Why do you continue to harm yourself in this way? What? Aiden inquired. You know what not to do. I took a quick look at the locked desk drawer that contained that specific document. Not to take over quite yet. Teresa's eyes were filled with tears. She wants me to lead the company. But I can't, Maria. All of my accomplishments have been attributed to you. The growth, the mergers. I am only the face. So why comply with it, since she dabbed at her eyes? Because that's the only way my mother can proudly look at me. If I failed, if I spoke the truth, she'd treat you like she does me. Teresa nodded miserably. I paused the recording. It's not simply bad what Mom is doing. It's illegal. And it's hurting everyone, even you. What are you going to do? I obtained the paperwork, my choice crystallizing. I'm going to reveal to everyone who has been in charge of this business. I want to know if you're with Mom or me. Teresa gazed first at the falsified papers and then at me. I saw my sister rather than my adversary for the first time in years. She murmured, Tell me what you need. I grinned as I sensed everything coming together. We must first discuss the next board meeting. It seemed like navigating a minefield during the week before the board meeting. Teresa avoided making eye contact as Mom walked about the workplace, hinting at exciting changes and new leadership. Sliding a heavy packet over his desk, Bruce added, Everything is ready whenever we pass in the hallways. Regarding this timing, are you certain? Mom hasn't given us an option. I looked at my watch. Today she is visiting with each board member separately, most likely in an attempt to win their support. A message from Aiden appeared on my phone. Your mom just walked smugly into Peterson's office. Bruce suggested that we move right away before she had a chance to do so. The door exploded. Dad was standing there looking pale. Maria, we must speak. Bruce picked up his papers. Let me give you a moment. After we were alone ourselves, Dad slumped in a seat. Mommy? Today is the day she wants me to sign my retirement documents. What? Next week is when the board will convene. It's better this way, she says. Cleaner? He combed his hair with his hand. She has everything ready. The documents. Teresa was named the new CEO in the news announcement. Dad. I crouched next to his chair. Do you think I'm trustworthy? He looked directly into my eyes. I do, you know. Don't sign anything then. Neither today nor tomorrow. I gave his hand a squeeze. Wait till the board meeting, please. What are you going to do, Maria? We were stopped by a knock. Teresa crept in and hurriedly shut the door. She responded, Mom is wrapping up with Peterson. Next up, she's coming here. Look between us, Dad. His expression was one of confusion. You two are collaborating. Things change, Teresa muttered. We must occasionally correct our errors. The sound of footsteps filled the corridor. Teresa's gaze expanded. Dad, she's coming, I muttered in a hurry. Just stall. no matter what she says or what occurs. Are you able to accomplish that? As Mom came into the office, he straightened his back and nodded. James, sweetheart. Oh, her smile wavered. Girls, I see you all there. I have a private matter to address with your father. Teresa really said anything. I need to discuss the London office signatures with you. Mom's face tensed almost unconsciously. Later, sweetheart. Isn't this more significant? I inquired. More significant than forged papers. The room's temperature appeared to drop by 10 degrees. Mom's smile grew piercing. I'm not sure what you're trying to say, Maria, but now isn't really the time for accusations. Mom! Teresa took a step forward. The signatures are known to us. Almost anything. Mom lost her temper. For a moment only. Sweetheart, Teresa. We spoke about this. In business, there are instances when we have to breach the law to get things done faster. By making Dad retire, I was able to obtain copies of the falsified paperwork. You're not understanding. Mom lost her temper. My actions have always been motivated by the future of the business and this family. I clarified that you meant for Teresa's future, or whatever you believe is best for Teresa. Mom's voice rose as she added, I know what's best for this company. Furthermore, it's not a person who hides behind papers and spreadsheets. Dad got to his feet. Linda, that's sufficient. It's not enough, James. Mom spun around on him. Put your signature on the documents. Before she destroys everything now. Before I wreck anything. Quietly, I asked. Your ideal strategy. You're trying to remove Dad and make Teresa your puppet CEO. You dare! Dad entered my office as the door opened. He signaled for me to stop the conversation as his weary eyes locked with mine. I'll give you a call back, I informed Aiden. Dad's shoulders slumped as he shut the door behind him. The invitation matter has now brought to my attention. Don't worry, Dad. Really. No, it isn't. He combed his graying hair with his hand. I requested that your mother send you one. I will, she said. I made an effort to grin. I'll be there, I know that now. Mom? With tears in her eyes, Teresa broke off. Please stop. I am no longer able to do this. I am unable to serve as CEO. I'm not competent. You are, of course. Everything has been handled flawlessly by you. No. Teresa's voice grew louder. Maria took care of everything. The London office, the growth, the mergers, everything. I merely showed her what she had done. Mom's face turned pale. You're siding with her. I'm going with the truth after all I've done for you. According to Teresa, the office door opened once more. Peterson, Bruce, and 2 other board members took over. I think, Bruce answered coolly. Now is the time to advance that board meeting. Do you believe this would be a good moment to talk about the company's future? Mom glanced at each of us, and then she realized. You have this planned. No, Mother. I collected the papers. My hand. Steady. You have this planned? Bruce guided us toward the boardroom, saying, I just want to make sure everyone sees exactly what you planned. Dad looked at me. He gave a little nod, his worried expression giving way to pride. The hiding period was over. Whether Mom was prepared or not, the truth would now be seen by all. As Bruce presented the facts, the boardroom took on the atmosphere of a trial. Mom's knuckles were white on the polished mahogany table as she sat stiffly in her chair. Every moment she started her confession, Teresa had continued to shake. You're saying that? Peterson bent over. That Maria has truly been the mastermind behind our most recent achievements. Indeed, Teresa's voice broke. The London office, the Asian growth, and the Richardson merger. Maria did all of the effort. I just made the presentation. The signatures, too, another board member inquired. Teresa responded, I didn't sign those documents. Mom did. It was essential for the adjustment, she remarked. Change? Peterson raised his eyebrows. Mom couldn't look at the plot to fire Dad and appoint me CEO Teresa. However, I am unable to accomplish it. I'm not competent. Maria is. Mom hit the table with her hand. This is absurd. Teresa, you're allowing her to control you. I broke the law in order to save this company's future. Dad signed a contract years ago, and I took it out. Or by disregarding this. The board members received copies from Bruce. Maria is now the company's largest shareholder thanks to this paper, which she signed 5 years ago, Mr. Holmes's insurance policy guaranteed that James, his best qualified successor, would run the business. Mom shook her voice. Is this accurate? Dad's chair straightened. I've seen Maria do amazing things for this business. You disregarded her accomplishments. I had to safeguard the businesses and her future. I was betrayed by you. Mom's expression twisted. After all that we constructed together. You deceived us, Linda. Your fixation on looks deceived both of our girls. Kendall moved forward and began playing the audio recording. Mom's voice filled the room as she talked about plans to push me out and compel Dad to retire. The board members looked at each other in horror. Peterson stated solemnly, Mrs. Holmes, these accusations are very serious. Counterfeiting, deception, attempted takeover of a company. It was all about Teresa. Mom exploded. She is the face that this business needs. Maria is fair. She is just... What exactly? Mom? Slowly I got to my feet. The only person who truly understands how to manage this business is the daughter. The one from whom you have been pilfering jobs for years. I was never a thief. Really? I brought up the board meeting's presentation from last month. In part 3, Teresa provided an explanation of the financial predictions. Teresa became pale. You didn't write them, therefore I can't. Silently, I said. Yes, I did. Similar to everything else. This is ridiculous. Mom's chair scraped back as she stood up. All of you are plotting against me. Teresa, be honest with them. Mom, I'm being honest. For the first time in years, Teresa's voice became more powerful. At last, I'm being honest. The board members were gathered together, and the uncomfortable stillness was filled with muttered remarks. Peterson finally said something. We must act right now in light of the data that has been revealed. You will be suspended while a thorough inquiry is conducted, Mrs. Holmes. Until a suitable succession plan is put in place, Mr. Holmes will continue to serve as CEO. Maria, he paused. I've witnessed the amount of hours you put in and how hard you work. The manner in which you assist your mother and sister. Please, Dad. I got to my feet and gathered Teresa's presentation materials. Mom will never see me the way she sees Teresa, and we both know that. I long ago came to terms with that. Teresa texted me, and my phone chimed. Has the presentation been corrected yet? Tonight, Mom wants me to practice it for her. Dad scowled as he glanced over the message. You could tell them, you know? This is not possible. Mom's voice erupted wildly. This is my business. Bruce really held up the deal. For the past 5 years, it has been Maria's business. No. Mom reached for Teresa's hand and turned to face her. Please, darling, we can make this right. Tell them you were under pressure and confused. Teresa withdrew. I apologize, Mom. I am no longer able to lie. Bruce's secret security detail waited outside as they took Mom out of the boardroom. She made one final circle around. This is something you'll regret. She gave me a hiss. You'll both feel bad about betraying me. Teresa fell into her chair with tears running down her cheeks after she had departed. Maria, I really apologize for everything. You're not to blame, I said, and to my surprise, I meant it. Mom played tricks on us both. Dad cleared his throat. The board must decide on a few things. Teresa, Maria. Story 6. Sophia, Ellie's mother, had always impressed Ellie with her fortitude and tenacity. After Ellie's father abandoned them before she was even born, Sophia had to raise Ellie alone. Ellie believed that their relationship was unshakable, since for years it was just the two of them against the world. Sophia put forth a lot of effort to support her kid, adamant about providing Ellie with a better life than she had. With Sophia's second marriage, things started to shift, her recent spouse. Ellie believed that Mark, a quiet guy with a reliable career, would provide some stability in their life. A few years later, Sophia gave birth to twin boys, bringing laughter and pleasure to the home, or so it appeared. But Ellie sensed the change almost instantly under the surface. Her mother's emphasis, which had previously been all on her, started to shift to the twins. Ellie first attempted to be sympathetic. Where she could, she offered assistance, believing that their relationship will return to normal when the twins grew older and that it was only a phase. But things just got worse. Sophia grew aloof, and her once friendly attitude with Ellie cooled. Eventually, Sophia and Mark revealed the financial burden of parenting twins during a heated family conversation. They were no longer able to provide for Ellie. Ellie was informed she had to move out when she was barely 17, feeling deceived and abandoned. After packing her things, Ellie departed the house she had known her entire life. She was thrown into an unfamiliar environment and had to mature far earlier than she had ever anticipated. She had no idea that this was the beginning of a journey that would change the way she thought about love, family, and resiliency. Ellie can recall the day she was orphaned when she was only 17. She was thrown into an emotional maelstrom that included uncertainty, rage, and heartache. She kept thinking about what her mother had said. Simply put, "We can no longer afford to keep you here." She gathered her things. She left the mansion that had been her safe refuge, her hands shaking. She had no notion how she was going to live, no strategy, and no direction. Her grandparents were the only people she could turn to. Although they embraced her, Ellie sensed that they were disappointed by Sophia's choice. They were retired and on a fixed income, yet they provided her with a place to live. Ellie was aware that she couldn't rely on them for very long, resolute in carrying her own burden. Ellie started looking for a part-time job right away. She ultimately secured a job at a nearby cafe, juggling weekend and after-school stints. Although the money was little, it was sufficient to meet her need. School supplies, bus tickets, and a little more for unforeseen circumstances. It was a difficult adjustment from a carefree adolescent to a young adult with obligations. Her days turned into a haze of late nights and early mornings. She would get up early to get ready for school, spend her afternoons cramming through her assignments, and then go directly to work. Despite the constant weariness, Ellie persevered because she was determined to succeed in life. Because money was always tight, she had to make compromises all the time. To save money, she wore the same few clothes and avoided social events. She knew she couldn't afford to indulge on anything other than necessities, so on some evenings she went to bed hungry. Ellie was committed to her studies in spite of the difficulties. She was aware that it was her path to a brighter future, but maintaining motivation was a struggle in and of itself. On other evenings, the stress of her circumstances felt like it might crush her. She frequently questioned how her life had devolved into this, how the mother could so readily abandon her after claiming to love her without conditions. The most difficult aspect was the loneliness. Because she couldn't relate to her peers' carefree lifestyles, Ellie felt alienated at school. While her reality was a never-ending battle to make ends meet, she admired their tales of weekend plans and family trips. She was scared of the pitying glances and uncomfortable silences that would follow, so she hardly ever talked about her home life. Ellie's greatest strength, however, was her tenacity. Little triumphs, her first paycheck, passing a challenging test, and the odd encouraging remark from her grandparents gave her comfort. She eventually came to value her freedom. Every obstacle she surmounted served as a reminder of her resilience and a step toward the life she had always dreamed of. Despite the uncertainty of the path ahead, Ellie refused to allow her situation define who she was. One day, she will create a life free from dependence on others, she promised herself. A life in which she would be able to rise above everything, not as someone who was abandoned. Ellie had a rather unusual path to college, without the help of her stepfather or mother. She was on her own to go through the procedure. Determined to build a future for herself, she worked diligently at her part-time job while balancing her studies. Her requirement for a co-signer for her education debts was the most obstacle. Her parents vehemently objected, saying they needed to preserve money for the baby's future. Their rejection served as a bitter reminder of their low regard for her. Fortunately, Ellie's uncle took over, yet not directly connected to her life. He agreed to co-sign her debt with one stipulation since he respected her tenacity. She had to swear that she would never let him pay for it. I appreciate his trust. Ellie promised to put in a lot of effort and make sure all payments were completed on schedule. She eventually started along the road to further study with that help. Life in college was hectic. Ellie decided to major in business at a public institution in the hopes of securing a steady job. Back-to-back classes, study sessions, and part-time jobs at a local bookstore made for exhausting days for her. The financial burden was enormous. Loan payments, groceries, rent, and textbooks hung over her like a threatening fog. She struggled to make ends meet and frequently relied on late-night coffee and quick noodles. Ellie did not have the luxury of contacting home for assistance, unlike her friends. She was unable to talk about her problems or celebrate her successes. Her grandparents, who occasionally wrote letters full of encouraging words and tiny care gifts, were the closest thing to family support for her mother. Ellie was kept grounded and reminded that she wasn't entirely alone by these small gestures of affection. Ellie thrived academically in spite of the difficulties. Determining to maximize her education, she devotes herself fully to her studies. While her peers partied on the weekends, she looked for internships, attended networking events, and made contacts wherever she could. Ellie used hers to plan her future and conduct industry research. She was aware that her degree was her key to freedom, and not simply a piece of paper. When Ellie crossed the stage to accept her diploma, it was a melancholy graduation day. Knowing her mother wouldn't be present, she looked around the throng. The sight of her grandparents, who had traveled despite their advanced age, gave her comfort even if the absence was painful. They applauded her and clapped. Their teary eyes betrayed their pride. Ellie would never forget that moment, a testament to her perseverance and hard effort. Ellie immediately entered the workforce after graduating. Eager to prove herself, she secured an entry-level position with a marketing company. The first several years were difficult. Rent, electricity, and loan payments were all barely covered by her wages, leaving little money for other expenses. Determined to make a name for herself and advance in the company, she frequently worked late into the night. Financial balancing was a never-ending battle. Luxuries like eating out or new clothes were seldom indulgences, and every dollar was tracked down. There were times when Ellie questioned if she would ever be able to escape the pattern of living paycheck to paycheck. But every obstacle just strengthened her resolve. She refused to allow short-term setbacks dictate her destiny, since she was proud of how far she had gone. Ellie's diligence gradually paid off. At work, she started to get noticed, get promoted, and take on more challenging tasks. She finally felt stable when her once empty savings account began to increase. As she negotiated adulthood, the perseverance, tenacity, and self-control she had acquired throughout her undergraduate years continued to serve as her compass. Ellie never lost sight of the sacrifices she had to make in order to reach her current position. Although her path wasn't straightforward, it helped her become a person who could take on any task. She was demonstrating to the world and to herself that she was so much more than the girl her family had abandoned by creating a life on her terms. Ellie's path through the business world was evidence of her unwavering willpower and perseverance. She gave her all to her work at a marketing agency after graduation, beginning at the bottom and putting forth endless effort to establish her value. She immediately established a reputation for having keen problem-solving abilities, original ideas, and the capacity to lead under duress. Her efforts were rewarded, and she rose through the ranks of the company in a matter of years, receiving one promotion, one after the other. Ellie maintained her concentration and humility in spite of her increasing success. She wasn't going to take her achievements for granted, since she understood that the challenges she had encountered had helped to mold her into the person she was today. She made her career her first focus and continued to push herself with each accomplishment. She surmounted obstacles including difficult teen relationships and late-night assignments with poise and tenacity. Ellie eventually attained a position she had previously only imagined, CEO of a successful technology business. It was the result of years of arduous labor, selflessness, and unwavering determination. However, she decided to keep her accomplishment a secret. Ellie wasn't the kind to look to other people for approval, particularly those who had previously questioned her or abandoned her. Only a select group of people, including her uncle, who had played a crucial role in assisting her in beginning her journey, were informed of the news, through her student loan co-signing. One evening over dinner, Ellie confided in her uncle about her promotion and thanked him for helping her through her most trying years. Ellie's uncle grinned proudly and insisted that she was solely responsible for her achievement. He couldn't help but tell the rest of the family how pleased he was of her. Unfortunately, at a family get-together, this well-intentioned act started a series of events that Ellie hadn't expected. Unaware of their tense relationship, her uncle casually told her mother, Sophia, about her accomplishment. The news surprised Sophia, and her astonishment soon gave way to hatred. Ellie's accomplishment served as a reminder of her decisions. Without her, the daughter she had rejected had created a remarkable life. Sophia didn't waste any time in finding Ellie, not to offer her congratulations or patch up their strained relationship, but to take care of herself. Not long after, she arrived at Ellie's house bearing the burden of their unresolved history. After years of quiet, Ellie believed that her mother's sudden interest in her life was opportunistic and empty. She had earned her success on her own, and she had no intention of letting her mother's return overshadow her accomplishments. Ellie had no idea that this encounter would lead to a confrontation that would call into question everything she had fought so hard to overcome. Ellie opened her door after hearing an unexpected knock on a calm evening. She was startled to find Mark and her mother, Sophia, standing there, stepfather. The scene evoked a wave of recollections. Even though she was shocked, Ellie remained calm and allowed them inside after she had put a lot of effort on burying them. She wanted to know what had caused them to come so quickly. Sophia made clumsy efforts at small chat as the discussion began stiffly after so many years of stillness. Her genuine aim, however, soon became apparent. "Your success has been communicated to us." With a tone that was more demanding than proud, Sophia started. "I'm happy to hear that you've made great progress, but we need your assistance immediately." Ellie's eyebrow went up. "What can you help with?" Mark said, his tone hard but steady. "We're having financial difficulties as the twins prepare to enter college. We assumed you would want to support your family because you're doing so well." Ellie felt a knot in her gut. She was astounded by their request's boldness. They now expected her to step in and cover her siblings' tuition after years of desertion, as if history had never occurred. "Are you serious?" With a hint of incredulity in her voice, Ellie inquired. "You threw me out of the house and left me on my own, and now you want me to pay for their college?" Sophia's face became stern. "Ellie, it wasn't like that. You know, it was difficult in those days. For the sake of the family, we had to make sacrifices." Ellie lost her fury. "Offerings? You mean the sacrifice was me? When I most needed you, you left me. I had to learn how to survive and do all of my college coursework on my own. You now wish to use guilt to get me to assist you?" As the disagreement intensified, tension in the room increased. Sophia attempted to defend their behavior by asserting that they had acted in accordance with their then-current best judgment, but that didn't sit well with Ellie. She told them about the years she worked at several jobs, the absence of family support as she was trying to establish a life for herself, as well as the loneliness she experienced around milestones and holidays. Ellie responded in a calm but acerbic tone. "You made it clear that I wasn't a priority. And now, after all these years, you come here to demand money rather than to express regret or make apologies. Just because it suits you doesn't mean you have the right to change history." Mark tried to diffuse the tension by implying that Ellie was being too severe. "Ellie, there are siblings. You want to see them succeed, don't you?" Unwavering in her conviction, Ellie shook her head. "You are in charge of them, not me. Years have passed since you made your decision, and now I'm making mine. I refuse to be coerced into tidying up your mess." Sophia became quite irritated. She said that Ellie owed them for the years that Sophia reared her alone and accused her of being ungrateful and self-centered. However, Ellie refused to allow remorse influence her choice and kept her ground. Ellie firmly remarked, "This conversation is over," and got up from her chair. "I made my decisions, and you made yours. Don't bother returning if you ever attempt to manipulate or guilt me again." Without another word, Sophia and Mark looked at one another in shock, knowing they had lost the war. Ellie stood by herself in her apartment as they departed, shutting the door behind them. She had an odd mixture of despair and relief. It had been a hard yet liberating confrontation. After refusing to let anybody over, she had at last established a distinct line. Ellie felt in charge of her life and her story for the first time in years. She was free of the burden of her history. Sophia wasn't prepared to let go of the altercation with her mother, but Ellie believed she had moved over it. Ellie's receptionist contacted her a few weeks later, and she seemed nervous. She replied softly, "Your mother is here. She is refusing to leave and is asking to see you." Ellie's heart fell. She didn't want to get into another fight, especially at work. She inhaled deeply and instructed the receptionist to let Sophia know she wasn't available. Sophia eventually departed after a stressful few minutes, but Ellie knew that this was not the end of it. When Ellie got home from work the following day, things became more heated. Sophia was waiting at her front door when she arrived. Sophia's voice was strong and uncompromising as she stated, "We need to talk." Ellie kept her distance and answered, "I've said everything I need to say. You must go." However, when Ellie turned to unlock her door, Sophia Dean backed down. She was abruptly attacked by Sophia, who grabbed her arm and screamed that Ellie had destroyed her life. Ellie was able to push her away and make a help call, but things soon became violent. Sophia became enraged and lashed out, accusing Ellie of being responsible for all of her problems. Fortunately, Ellie's neighbors alerted the police after hearing the disturbance. Ellie's stepfather had already arrived and was attempting to soothe Sophia when the police came. However, it was too late. Ellie had had enough. The very next day, she applied for a restraining order and filed charges for the attack. Ellie felt that was the best way to keep herself safe, even if it was a hard choice. Ellie's lawyer assisted in getting a restraining order swiftly after the police recorded the incident. The lawsuit seemed like an essential move to get her calm back. Her life has been plagued by her mother's shadow for far too long. She could now put an end to this chapter permanently, since she had legal protection and defined limitations. Although that wasn't the conclusion Ellie had hoped for, it was necessary for her to genuinely move on. Ellie sat in her apartment's silence. She considered her journey from a scared adolescent thrown into adulthood to a self-assured and successful CEO. It had not been an easy path for her, but each obstacle helped to mold her into the strong woman she is now. Although the encounter with her mother had been unpleasant, it had also provided insight. Ellie came to the realization that she had been burdened by her past for too long. The moment has come to let go. She was no longer defined by her mother's behavior, and it had no influence on her destiny. With a feeling of fresh intent, Ellie made the decision to go forward once more. She started looking for a new house, a larger, lighter one that would represent her achievement and development. It went beyond simply improving her living conditions. It was about letting go of the ghosts of her past and starting over. Ellie made the decision to put herself first and surround herself with people who truly cared about her. She was prepared to completely embrace the independent and strong life she had created. Striding boldly into the future,